UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and a good evening to you. This is Talk and it is Petrie and I'm with you now for the next 3 hours, and of course at midnight it is your chance to talk back. And I want to talk to you about whether you think 16 is too young to be a voter. What were you like when you were 16? Could you have really done something as important as that? We know that there's been a lot of talk about the representation of the People's Bill. That is being introduced tomorrow, the February the 12th. And I want to know whether you think that 16-year-olds should be afforded the right to vote. There's lots of things that 16-year-olds can't do and certainly haven't done. So I'm going to pin my flag to the mast here and say I think 16 is too young. I've got a son, and at 16 he was a complete and utter moron. I'm just going to say it. 15, 16, complete idiot. He's not now. He's brilliant. But at that age, he didn't know anything about anything. Well, actually, he thought he knew everything about everything, right? And in fact, he knew nothing. And apparently, according to him at that age, I knew nothing. So I just don't know whether they're open or available to be looking at things in the round at that age. But I'd love to know if you think that this is a good idea. It's a good idea for Labour, who would be introducing this bill, because all the statistics tell us that younger people are more likely to vote Labour. They're more likely to be ideologically more aligned with Labour. It's only when you start sort of paying tax and mortgages and things like that that you might think, ugh, I'm not sure socialism is the way to go for my pocket. But I'd love to know from you what you think about this. So do give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you straight back. And you can send me a message as well. Put the word talk and your message to 87222. Would you have trusted you with a vote at 16? That's the question, really, isn't it? So that's coming up at midnight. Before that, I don't know if you've been paying any attention to this story. This is a really bizarre story, fresh from the United States of America. This is Nancy Guthrie, an 84-year-old woman, the daughter of quite a well-known US TV presenter called Savannah Guthrie, who's been kidnapped. So we're going to head to Arizona and chat with a reporter there who's been covering this story to see what's going on. It is really, really bizarre. So we'll be chatting about that a little bit later on. Also, we're going to be chatting with Kevin Schofield from the Huffington Post about PMQs. And really, it was only Monday that Keir Starmer fought off losing his job. Only Monday. It's only Wednesday now. Tell you what, minutes are a long time in politics right now. So we're going to be checking in on the politics of the week as well with Kevin Schofield. But before that, the UK government is set to increase its military presence in Norway over the next 3 years. It's going to double its troops from 1,000 to 2,000 personnel. This is in direct response to Russian aggression. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky has set a date later this month to share his plans for Ukrainian elections following pressure from the US. He also has to have a referendum on if he's going to give up land. If he's going to cede land to Russia, he cannot make that decision by himself on behalf of the Ukrainian people. So he has to put that to a referendum. So the election will, as far as I understand, will include both the parliamentary election or presidential election and the referendum on giving up land to Russia. And on Friday, the largest security gathering will take place in Germany. The Munich Security Conference will gather decision makers from across the globe to discuss international security policy, and never has that been more important. You might remember last year at this very security gathering, J.D. Vance stood up and made his speech about how, you know, Europe was on its own and you know, it's time to stand up and do the right thing. He also said there was no freedom of speech, civilizational decline, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff as well. So that was a year ago. So it's Marco Rubio going this time. There's 50 other world leaders that are going to be there. And this is on the back of Emmanuel Macron, the French president, just, I think, late last week saying Europe has got to stand tall. It's got to accept itself as a collective world power. But how far will that extend when it comes to defence? Well, joining me now, I'm thrilled to say, here in the studio is Keir Giles, a senior fellow at Chatham House and author of a book you've heard me mention many times, which is Who Will Defend Europe? Good to have you in the studio.
Hello again, Petrie.
Nice to meet you. OK, so let's first of all have a look at this meeting that's going to be happening on Friday. Marco Rubio is going to be there. Look, there's a lot of upset in Europe at the moment over Donald Trump's ideas and policies and indecision or decision-making or rewriting of history, which has been the most offensive for many European countries. How is this going to work, do you think?
Well, we shouldn't be surprised, whatever comes out. After all, we've had a year to get used to the idea, and we know more or less what the US position is. We know what they're likely to say. Possibly Marco Rubio might say it in a slightly more emollient way than J.D. Vance did, but it still might be the same messages. Europe has to be able to look after itself because the Americans now have other things to be interested in. Oh, and by the way, they are concerned about the direction the Europeans are going in. It was the national defense strategy that talked about the civilizational erasure that Europe was at risk of because of mass migration. But they also came back to the theme that you mentioned, the freedom of expression, which was hilarious, of course, this time last year when J.D. Vance said, there is no freedom of expression in Europe, and a lot of Germans said, you can't say that.
Yeah.
Obviously not actually hearing themselves. So some of the points that the United States is trying to make about how Europe needs to sort itself out are not that stupid. It gets lost in the hype and the hyperbole. And the Munich Security Conference, this annual jamboree, it always gives lots of headlines because you've got all of these decision makers, all of their entourage, thousands of people all gathered together in an enormous carnival. There's bound to be something happening. We just shouldn't be all that surprised.
But I mean, it's sounding really preachy from America now. It's sounding like they completely believe that they are the kings of the world, right? I mean, I agree, as most right-thinking people would, that Europe has to stand up to its defence obligations. I completely agree with that. But how many more times can America say that without it sounding like an implicit order to do that from the kings of the world?
Well, this is what people are watching out for. They know that that's the direction of travel. They're trying to keep the Americans on the side for as long as possible. They're hoping that it's going to be an orderly drawdown of US support as opposed to suddenly turning off the taps, which was the fear when Trump first came to power. But, of course, what that means is you have all of these European countries, including the UK, apparently playing along with this make-believe world, pretending that the Trump reality is the real one, pretending that everything's fine in relations with the United States, that there's a peace process for Ukraine, and so on. What we hope is that there's a plan B, so that when that pretense finally falls through, Europe is actually ready to do something, and the UK is ready to do something because they've thought through that alternative. Trouble is, in a lot of cases, we don't really see the evidence of that happening, and it's really just the pretense, the playing along, the pandering to Trump, instead of actually getting their act together.
I mean, Rutte is the worst at either the worst or the best, depending on how you look at it. Calling him daddy, I'll never forgive him for. But there is a pretense at the moment, and the only person who isn't pretending is Trump, right? I don't think he is pretending. I think he is clearly, he's got no interest in history or any knowledge of it when he says that, you know, NATO wouldn't come to our aid. The only time that the Article 5 was triggered was on behalf of the United States of America, and every member of NATO stepped up and stepped in for years. For decades, right? This went on for a long time. So his disrespect and disregard for the NATO alliance. That is something we should be concerned with, isn't it?
Certainly, but it's just a symptom. It's just a symptom of his view of the world, or whoever is actually pulling the strings and feeding him the lines. Because one thing we can be fairly confident of is that a lot of this is not coming from Trump. A lot of the things that are happening in the United States are too organized, too systematic, too well planned, too much like somebody having read the manual on authoritarian state capture, and Donald Trump is not a great reader.
Project 2025.
So yes, who exactly is in charge over there? Now, it's really fascinating when you talk to people who've worked with Trump and are still Trumpists despite that experience. They tell a story of an entirely different individual behind closed doors. They want us to believe that he is a shrewd operator, and all of the nonsense, all of the ignorance, all of the dementia is actually just play acting. And in reality, he knows precisely what he's doing, and he knows how to go about it. They also say, for example, that the reason why he pushes for a Nobel Peace Prize is because he is so averse to casualties and wants killing to stop everywhere. They stick to that story, even though it's completely unreconcilable with what we observe from Trump, both publicly and the actions that the United States takes under him. But yet, it seems to be this article of faith that actually there is a sensible way of operating that is happening in the US White House, which is not just driven by mad impulse.
But the other worry is Donald Trump's apparent relationship with Russia. And the reason I mention that in regards to NATO is that if Russia wanted to test NATO's Article 5, if they wanted to test Donald Trump, if they wanted to test whether we would stand up to them, there are a few places they could do that in that isn't overtly bombing Poland or Norway, for example.
Yeah, absolutely. For Russia, NATO is their big problem, because NATO is what stands in the way of them achieving this dream of Vladimir Putin of restoring the empire. And as he says, rubbing out the lines on the map that were laid down 100 years ago, and he thinks they need to be corrected.
Bombs and things. That was a very strange noise. I do apologise. I don't know what that was. Carry on, Keir.
So it's NATO that stops him doing that. So Russia looks for ways to divide NATO. That could be the United States. It need not necessarily be the United States, but certainly every time it's called into question whether the US would actually meet its commitments, that gives Russia that little extra bit of confidence.
Well, they didn't meet their commitment to Ukraine. They made a commitment to Ukraine that if they got rid of their nuclear weapons, that they would defend Ukraine against an incursion from Russia.
Well, that's a problem with US commitment overall, because of course it was under the Biden administration that the United States decided they could not support Ukraine to victory over Russia. They could not afford for Russia to suffer a defeat. They thought that was more dangerous than for a neighbor of Russia to be destroyed. And that in itself, of course, is a major problem for NATO countries, because the same would apply to any other neighbor of Russia that was a victim of Russian aggression. The same calculus. The only thing standing between Ukraine and them is Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and anybody that's actually read that knows how vague it is and how little reassurance it actually gives.
Yeah, I learned that
from
your book, actually, that it was merely more a suggestion, Article 5. There are ways to not agree to it, and there is that concern, isn't there? And will that be part of the conversation, do you think, on Friday? You know, come on, America, we need to know we've got you if Article 5 is invoked.
It'll certainly be part of the conversations that are happening around it, and also a lot of the preparatory work, because let's not forget, at these big set pieces, people are delivering speeches that have been worked out long in advance. But yes, it's an ongoing cause for concern for Europe as a whole, especially when, as you say, you have Mark Rutte, Secretary General of NATO, saying, of course we can't do it without the Americans, dream on, which is not the message that people want to hear if they're looking for alternative ways of deterring Russia without having to go to the enormous expense of pretending to be the United States.
That brings me to what's going on with Ukraine. Vladimir Zelensky is talking about calling an election in wartime, which seems odd. But he does need to hold a referendum, doesn't he, before he hands over any land?
If that is the way that he decides he has to go, then yes, he has to actually amend the Constitution. He has to go through all kinds of legal hoops to actually make this happen. But again, it's a demand by the United States that has originated in Russia. So it is Trump once again forcing Russia's outcome on Ukraine. It is a terrible idea, a disastrous idea to hold these elections and these referendums in the current situation, not just because they're in a war. I mean, this country has had elections during wartime before and it worked, but it's the opportunities that it gives Russia to skew the outcome, to interfere in their elections as they've interfered elsewhere around the world, and to make sure that this is a means of weakening Ukraine even further, even if it is just by bombing every polling station they can reach and then calling the election invalid because people didn't vote.
The British troops in Norway, it doesn't sound like a huge number to double from 1,000 to 2,000, but it is significant as a statement, isn't it?
It is, and it's really interesting to look at what's happening in Norway as the context for this as well. They are having what this country has been calling for a long time, an actual conversation about defense. Why do we have these people there? What is the threat? They have made government statements about how in the far north of the country, their problem is if Russia decides to protect its nuclear arsenal just across the border, then Norwegian territory is at risk. And that, of course, is one of the reasons why we have foreign troop presence in Norway. Anybody that remembers back as far as the Cold War will remember how it was the Royal Marines and the Royal Netherlands Marines that were supposed to be sent up there in time of a crisis.
It's still Royal Marines, isn't it?
It is still the Royal Marines now. Who these additional forces are supposed to be, I do not know. I don't think that's been publicly reported. But the whole point of them being there is to serve as a deterrent to Russia doing precisely the kind of thing that you're talking about, finding a pressure point within NATO that would actually challenge the whole of the alliance.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because there are those troops in Norway, but Vladimir Putin has said that he won't allow British troops in Ukraine. I mean, the idea that we were going to send British troops and there would be some French troops and whatever. But he said, no, they're NATO troops, so they can't be there.
Well, he's bound to say that. He doesn't want them there.
Yeah, but he can't want them in Norway either.
That's a very different situation. The fact that NATO troops are on NATO territory is something that Russia will be upset about. However, in Ukraine, if the war ends with foreign troops on Ukrainian soil permanently, then Russia has brought about the result that it went to war to avoid. The whole point, according to Russia, was to make sure that Ukraine did not join the West and did not have forces within it that could threaten Russia. Believe that if you will. But if you end up with a situation where Ukraine is actually protected by the multinational force that they wanted to avoid in the first place, obviously that's something that's going to be unacceptable for Russia, even before you consider the point that
who else protects the line if it's not NATO troops?
I don't think anybody is even suggesting that they will be on the front line. As far as I understand, the latest iteration of these plans, it is a force which is far away from the front line and is simply supporting Ukraine, as opposed to being something which will directly deter Russia. But it's all hypothetical, because it's not going to happen in the form that we see. There's not going to be the ceasefire in the way that's been described. All of the suggestions that there will be British and French troops in Ukraine after a ceasefire will just make sure that there won't be a ceasefire, because there is no way that Russia will be agreeing to that any more than they've agreed to all of the other offers that have come from Trump via Ukraine for achieving all of Russia's aims in the first place.
Well, I mean, and that is also a face-saving exercise for Putin, isn't it? I mean, the man has an ego.
It helps Putin enormously, yes.
Yeah, to keep the war going. That just leaves me really to talk about the High North. And why is that so important? Why is the High North so important? Because, you know, we've seen Donald Trump actually shut up about Greenland, but he went on and on and on. We must own it, we must own it. But there's a lot of talk about the High North at the moment. Why is that strategically so important?
Well, I could give you an extremely long answer, but the simple way of putting it is, when you're looking at how the United States looks from Russia, how Europe looks from Russia, whether the UK is a frontline state, don't look at a map. Look at a globe.
Look at the top of
and
the globe.
look at it from Svalbard or northern Norway, because then things look very different. Then you see, for example, how for the United States, Greenland and Alaska, they bracket Canada, and they actually are in a direct line between where Russia's nuclear weapons are and the Midwest of the United States.
And
you
it also shows that Russia is a very close neighbour of America.
Absolutely. But also, the other point that when people are thinking about defense of this country, you realize then that when these Russian bomber pilots fly what they call Zaugel around the corner, around the top of Norway into the Norwegian Sea, they're already within range of missile strikes of not just the UK, but if they go a little bit further, France, Spain, and so on. It makes them all frontline states if you look at a globe, not a map.
And so that is why there will have to be a NATO force defending the High North?
Not just a NATO force on land, because this is also the site of Russia's nuclear bastion. It's one of the key areas of sensitivity for Russia, but also protecting those sea lines, protecting the airways, making sure that those Russian warships and aircraft do not get into a position where they're going to threaten or coerce or even attack Western countries. That's the task for making sure that Russia is actually contained further away. But we shouldn't underestimate just how many thousands of kilometers these missiles reach. If we think back to the war in Syria and Russia launching missiles from the Caspian Sea thousands of kilometers away, and now those same polar airfields are the ones which the long-range bombers take off from to deliver missiles into Ukraine.
But so there's no real, is there a real threat from Russia at the moment on the High North? I mean, he's kind of using all his money and time with Ukraine, but I understand that he is opening up bases that were once open during the Cold War.
Bases, rebuilding infrastructure, basically getting everything ready so that if and when those Russian forces on the Ukrainian front are freed up, they can come flooding back into where they left from in the first place, only in much greater numbers. That's what they're preparing for. That is why they are now, Russia is now building up a strategic reserve of people, reserves of ammunition, rebuilding their stocks of armored vehicles, and so on, because Ukraine is not destroying them as fast as Russia is rebuilding.
And is the High North, in your view, would the High North be the first point of call for Putin, or would it be Ukraine, Poland, rebuilding the Soviet Union?
It's a question that we constantly get asked. Where would they go next?
Yeah.
And the answer is constantly shifting because it's a political equation. It's not just military capability. It's where would Russia get the most benefit? Where would they get the return on investment of the enormous risk they would be taking and also the assets they would be using? So where they will be thinking is, what is the weak point within NATO? Where is the maximum return? Where's the single brick that we can pull out and bring the whole thing crashing down? And that's not necessarily a frontline state. It could be a soft target far behind the lines as we think of it, like, for instance, the UK.
Yeah. What about Russia itself? Is this now a country that will be permanently at war, do you think? Because if he has these, he's running out of time. Age will do that to you. So if he's to fulfill his dreams, he's got to keep moving. But what about the country of Russia? How does that keep working for its people?
Yes, Putin might be running out of time, but Russia sadly has a lot of time still on its hands. We hear all of these forecasts about the difficulties that the economy is in and how it's going to imminently crash, but we hear them year after year after year. And unfortunately, there's not a direct line between the Russian economy collapsing and the war stopping. Because we've seen time and time before, after people stop getting paid, that doesn't mean they're not necessarily still in the trenches trying to kill people. So there are a lot of things that have to happen before Russia actually stops being a problem, and none of them are on the cards at the moment. Losing Putin is not going to change the way Russia is governed, and it's not going to change Russia's idea of where it is in the world and how it should assert itself against its neighbours.
And of course it's still being supported by China, which I was wondering how Keir Starmer was going to bridge that, trying to cozy up to China, at the same time trying to support Ukraine, and yet China's supporting Russia.
Well, he's a lawyer. He can probably find some way of weaseling through that.
Yeah, but it's all the geopolitics at play, isn't it?
Yes.
It is. We can't just look at any one country anymore as being on its own, like America's trying to do. America first, America only.
That's exactly
it is impossible to do that in this global world.
Even just in the war in Ukraine, people tend to overlook that there are two coalitions, two alliances almost, that are backing the two sides. Ukraine has us and had until recently the United States. It has Europe. Russia has China, Iran, North Korea, and those are propping Russia up. China is keeping the conflict going because neither of those two coalitions has decided to intervene decisively and bring it to an end. It's in China's interest for this to drag on as long as possible because it weakens Russia. It also weakens the West. It's in the United States' interest, as we spoke about a few minutes ago, not to allow Russia to be defeated and so to keep Ukraine going, but not actually force the conflict. So all of these different interests are interplaying, and the result is tragic for Ukraine and for Ukrainians.
Finally, you mentioned Iran there. It would be remiss of me not to bring that in with the threats that Donald Trump is making there as well. What is going on there? What would he bomb? I mean, I'm not entirely sure.
I think that if we look at the example of what happened in Venezuela and didn't happen yet in Greenland, it tells us that there's not a great deal of use in trying to predict exactly what the United States is going to do or whether it's going to help the situation. I think this is one where we have to wait and see and hope that they actually have a plan.
Yeah. I think they probably make it up on the hoof. Keir, it's fascinating to talk to you, as it always is. Thank you so much for coming in. Keir Giles there, Senior Fellow at Chatham House and author of Who Will Defend Europe. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And of course, coming up at midnight, it is Talk Back. It is your chance to do just that. And the government plans to lower the voting age for all elections to 16 years old. It's in the representation of the People's Bill, which will be introduced tomorrow, the 12th of February. Now, we know they've been talking about this for some time, but I just want to catch up with you and think, do you think that 16 is just too young? Do you think that 16-year-olds really, it's a real responsibility, isn't it? It'll extend the cohort of voters, they think, by 1.7 million people. And of course, it is helpful to the idealistically young for Labour, because they're idealistic, aren't they? They think, you know, they don't know much. is what I'm going to say. But maybe you disagree. Maybe when you were 16, you could have been trusted with the vote. I think I probably could have been. I was, you know, out of my home. I was kicked out at 16, nearly 17. Not for anything I did, but it was yet another divorce and a smaller house. But you know, I think I was fairly sensible at that age. But I certainly know that my son wouldn't. I don't think he would have been really interested in it either, to be honest with you. He is now, but. Is that unfair? Maybe you think that 16-year-olds should have the vote, that there's an awful lot of things that they can do. There's also other things that they can't do. But then do we lower the age of being an adult from 18 to 16? Are 16-year-olds ready for that responsibility? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And it was PMQs today, which I watched, so you didn't have to. It was a little bit feisty. I thought that, do you know what? I thought that everybody was a bit too nice, actually, today. I was expecting a little bit more. Anyway, the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, pressed him on his decision to put his former communications director, Matthew Doyle, in the House of Lords. Doyle had been suspended from Labour over his links to a councillor convicted of sex offences. I mean, seriously, it was child sexual images. What is it with these people and paedophilia and children? What is it? Well, the member of the House of Lords has been sitting with the Labour benches and said he will no longer take up the whip due to his links to sex offender Sean Morton. Starmer has been rocked by a number of resignations and calls for him to resign. So what next for the PM? Well, it was only Monday that all of that stuff was going down. It feels like it was months ago, because since then so much more has happened. So in order to catch up on all of this, we've got Kevin Schofield, political editor at the Huffington Post UK. I mean, Kevin, are you loving or hating your job right now?
Well, I'm certainly not hating it. Yeah, I'm maybe loving it. It's a bit strong, but yeah,
You're definitely not bored.
Not bored. No, it is incredible every day. Even when you think, so yesterday was a little bit quieter because Monday had been so crazy. So yesterday, I think everyone took a bit of a breath, and then it all just blew up again. So yesterday evening, when this Matthew Doyle story broke about him losing the Labour whip over his links to a convicted paedophile, and then that just dominated things today. Obviously, Prime Minister's questions, and it's just been another fairly breathless 24 hours. I mean,
there's was it Lady Brackley who said to lose one parent, but to lose two. But it is extraordinary to hire one person with links to a paedophile could be seen as an accident, but to hire two people with links to a paedophile, it is extraudinary.
It is. It's. I think you call it a pattern of behaviour.
Yeah.
It's. Well, it strikes to the heart of the Prime Minister's judgment, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah. And who's advising him, and what advice is he taking?
Well, we know that he was advised by his former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, to appoint Peter Mandelson. McSweeney paid with his job on Sunday. We don't know at the moment who advised him on Matthew Doyle, although he knows Matthew Doyle well. He was his Director of Communications in opposition. He took him into Number 10 with him, and he was a Director of Communications until he stood down, was sacked, however you want to describe it, last March. So he does know Matthew Doyle. He's known him for a very long time. And there's a suspicion, you know how these things work, Petrie, people are rewarded with a peerage for services rendered, and it was always rumoured that once Matthew Doyle stood down as Director of Communications, he would end up in the House of Lords eventually. He did last month, but he's only lasted a month as a Labour peer and is now had the whip suspended. Now calls for him to be kicked out of the House of Lords entirely. But the crux of the matter is what the Prime Minister knew about his association with this paedophile Sean Morton, and whether or not, having discovered what we now know about it, could he have stopped the peerage from going ahead? And it looks as though he could have and didn't.
And I mean, that's the thing, is that got the biggest boo, didn't it, today in the playpen in the Commons, where when he said, well, Lord Doyle did not give a full account, of his actions or his associations, and it's kind of like, you can't keep saying. I mean, how gullible are you? Are you associated with a? It's like the ESTA form for going to America. I know you've just been there recently. It asks if you're a terrorist or not, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't tick it, right? So I mean, is that the line of questioning? Do you support paedophiles? No. All right, then that's good then. I mean, it feels like the vetting process isn't robust enough. It feels like the questions asked aren't good enough. You can't blame somebody for not telling you something, can you?
No, well, exactly. Stephen Flynn, the SNP leader at Westminster, had a great line at PMQs. He said, just on that issue that you just mentioned, he said to Keir Starmer, he must be the most gullible former director of public prosecution in history. Because you're right, that's twice now he has said, wasn't my fault, I was lied to, therefore my hands are clean. But once I found out I'd been lied to, then I acted. Well, you're the Prime Minister and you are a trained lawyer. Surely your job, you should be trained how to interrogate and question people and make sure they're telling you the truth. You shouldn't just take it at face value. But funnily enough, I spoke to someone quite senior in Number 10 just a few weeks ago, and we're talking about Keir Starmer, and he described him as the most incurious person that he'd ever met, takes everything at face value, doesn't ask questions, just accepts what he's told.
What a terrible lawyer he must have been.
And that's how it's blown up in his face with Mandelson and now with Matthew Doyle.
Yeah, I don't recommend he goes back to law. I don't think anyone will hire him. I mean, looking at Mandelson, and of course as trade envoy Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, there's more to come, isn't there, from these two, and what potentially they may have done against the country. Mandelson particularly, I mean, if he gets charged and Andrew's done a similar thing, I mean, it really does, you can draw a straight line, can't you?
Well, you can, and you know, pure speculation obviously, but where a member of the royal family, although he's been stripped of his titles, he is still the king's brother, were he to become the subject of, you know, a criminal investigation or of be charged, it would be absolutely seismic. On Mandelson, politically, this is just fraught with danger for the Prime Minister. Remember, we've still got all these documents to be published on what communications there were between Number 10, Mandelson and other ministers, other advisors, in the run-up to him becoming the UK ambassador. You know, all sorts of things, WhatsApp messages that were obviously never meant for public consumption. So this will be ministers being very candid with one another, probably being quite critical of one another. It could be really, really embarrassing for Keir Starmer. Whether he's still Prime Minister by then, of course,
well,
remains to be seen, because it could be quite some time before these communications emerge.
Talking of those communications, I mean, Wes Streeting, nobody's questioning whether he's on manoeuvres for the top job, except for him, apparently. But the WhatsApp messages signed off with kisses to Mandelson. I mean, it's yucky, isn't it? The whole thing is just grubby.
Yeah, it's a little bit too cosy, and knowing obviously what we now know about Peter Mandelson and his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. You know, Keir Starmer, I think, is rightly being criticised for making him ambassador. But these communications, I believe, anyway, between Mandelson and Wes Streeting, they happened after all of that. They happened after he was sacked, and he was still in touch with Peter Mandelson, despite knowing what we all know now about how close he was to a convicted paedophile again, another convicted paedophile. So, yeah, it doesn't look great. Clearly, this was Wes Streeting trying to get ahead of it, you know, get it all out there before it's released at a timing which he can't control. And, you know, I spoke to one person earlier, they couldn't quite understand it. They thought, well, there's nothing too, it's embarrassing, there's nothing too damning in these messages, but why not just wait until they're released alongside everyone else's, and then it would all just get lost in the fog almost of everyone's messages coming out at the one time, whereas now, because he put them all out himself, they become the focus of the story. I mean, it kind of went away. He said some stuff about Gaza, which isn't official government policy. He criticised the government on the economy, saying there was no plan for growth. A bit embarrassing, but not terminal for Wes Streeting. But he certainly made himself pretty unpopular with a lot of cabinet ministers who think that he shouldn't have done it, and also with the police who say no more, we don't want any more of these documents being released in advance of our investigation because it could prejudice the investigation. So I like a bit of a rap in the knuckles there for Wes Streeting.
Can Will Starmer still be Prime Minister by the end of this year, or let's just say by party conference?
I mean, I would be surprised. It would be a pretty remarkable feat of survival, I think, if he were. I mean, if you work on the assumption that Labour are going to lose the by-election at the end of this month, which I think is a fairly good chance they will in Gorton and Denton, if you work on the assumption that the elections in May in Scotland, Wales and across councils in England are terrible for Labour, and I think they will be, I think the idea that he then somehow staggers on until September or October when party conference season rolls round again, I think it would be just stretches credulity, really. It's not out of the question. You know, we keep saying Labour are not great at getting rid of leaders, and there's no obvious mechanism for getting rid of them, like the Tories have the letters to the 1922 committee chairman. Labour don't have an equivalent. It just requires someone to get enough support to challenge. Probably, if things are really bad, if they're standing amongst the smoking ruins of the Labour Party on the morning of May the 8th, then they might just have no option. Someone's going to have to pull the trigger. And I think that's probably what's going to happen. And then we're probably in for a summer of a fairly messy Labour contest for the different wings of the party tearing lumps out each other. Great fun for people like me. Maybe not so great for the country at large.
Not great for the country at large, you know. But Keir Starmer said he's going to still be there. But it just takes a few high-profile resignations, doesn't it? And that's him done. Thank you, Kevin. Lovely to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin Schofield, political editor at the Huffington Post UK. Quick break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And just a reminder, coming up at the top of the hour, we have Simon Diggins here to go through the papers, retired British colonel and host of the Sun's Superpowers Exposed series. So he'll be in the studio to go through the papers for you. Now, I don't know if you've been paying attention to this story, but it is absolutely fascinating. This is a story of Nancy Guthrie. It's happening over in the US, but it has gripped the United States of America since her disappearance nearly 2 weeks ago. The 84-year-old woman, who's the mother of a prominent US TV presenter, Savannah Guthrie, was last seen at her home near Tucson, Arizona on the night of the 31st of January. Yesterday, the FBI released doorbell footage that showed a masked person apparently carrying a gun on her doorstep the night that she went missing. Police officers have been seen searching the house of a man in connection with the case. Now, her family have released several appeals for help with a reward of $50,000. And the family and various media outlets have received ransom requests, but the deadline had expired on Monday. The FBI have not been clear yet whether these ransom requests are legitimate or not. So joining me to discuss this is Jessica Boehm, who's Axios Phoenix reporter in Arizona and has been following the case. Jessica, thank you very much indeed for joining me. This has absolutely gripped America, hasn't it, due to the high-profile nature of Nancy Guthrie's daughter. What's the latest?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been just a really chilling couple of weeks now, a week and a half. So as you mentioned, we finally got our first look at a potential suspect or person of interest, this masked man who was seen trying to destroy essentially her doorbell camera. And the reason that this took almost or a week and a half, 10 days to get to the public is because Nancy Guthrie didn't pay for like the type of subscription where the video is stored on a cloud or something like this. So this required some amount of technological advanced system to retrieve, and it was finally available yesterday. And the goal, of course, in sharing this is that maybe someone recognizes. You can kind of see eyes and a mouth. Obviously he's wearing a mask, so who knows, but that was the big development yesterday. And then there was a rush of hope, because there was news that the FBI and local law enforcement were interviewing or were questioning, rather, a man that they suspected was connected with this. Now, early this morning, that man was released and wasn't charged, and he says he has no idea why he was questioned, and that he didn't know Nancy, doesn't know who Savannah Guthrie is, and obviously he wasn't charged. So now, at least in the public's eye, like, it feels like there's nothing. Obviously the hope is that maybe law enforcement knows more than they're letting on, and they're keeping that to themselves intentionally for the sake of investigation.
Now, these ransom notes, I understand that your organisation received one of them, is that right?
No, we did not receive one.
Oh.
It was sent to television stations in Tucson and to an entertainment television program in the U.S.
And have the FBI confirmed that these are legitimate, that there is some veracity to them, or have they said nothing?
No, I mean, really, law enforcement has said very little in general, but they have acknowledged the existence of these ransom demands. They noted that there were two deadlines associated with it. The last one was this past Monday, so that has lapsed. And they have not said whether they think it is legitimate. They've said that they're investigating it. Everyone's a suspect, all of the standard things. What we do know is that the Guthrie children, Savannah Guthrie and her siblings, did make an appeal over the weekend where they posted a video saying, like, we understand, we hear you, please let us know, like, basically, like, we're ready to pay, but we need to know how to do that. So it's all very confusing to the public, but again, the hope is that maybe law enforcement has a better idea than what they're letting on.
And what sort of money are they asking? Do we know what these ransom notes, were they all the same amount of money? Was it a lot of money?
The reports were that it was around $6 million, I want to say, and it was asked for in Bitcoin, presumably, so it was less traceable.
Wow. And the Nancy Guthrie, there is a concern over her health as well.
Of course, yes. She's 84 years old, so this would be a dire situation regardless, but she does have a medication that she is supposed to have been taking daily, which obviously we have no way of knowing if that's occurred. It's January 31st.
Has this ever happened before? Is this because, obviously it would appear that Nancy Guthrie has been kidnapped because of who her daughter is, right? And therefore this is about money, but it may well not be.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we truly have no idea, but like just the sheer coincidence of it being someone so prominent's mother and this very what feels like a very significant effort that was taken to not be able to be traced by law enforcement by this point. The thing I keep telling people, and I assume it's the same way in the UK, is like everybody has a doorbell camera. There are cameras on almost every street corner.
Yeah.
How was nothing picked up? Like, it feels like this was someone who probably knew what they were doing. And so as far as like what the motivation was, no idea, but it's highly unusual for something like this to happen. I cannot think of the last time a legitimate ransom kidnapping situation unfolded in the United States. This is not normal in any way.
And for one person to carry this out as well, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I saw somebody wearing rubber gloves and a mask, I wouldn't open my door. So, there's so many questions, aren't there, as to how this happened. If there was just one person involved, why is there such a vacuum of information?
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Yesterday, our FBI director did indicate that they are pursuing persons of interest, meaning multiple people. So I think that there is an assumption that this was not a lone actor, but perhaps a coordinated effort. But one thing I keep trying to remind like my readers and everyone else who's so eager to know what happened to Nancy, we all are, but there is so much speculation and armchair investigating going on online. And at the end of the day, like, we don't know why she went missing or who is involved. And I think it's really important to not jump to too many conclusions before we have a resolution to this, which we hope is soon.
Yeah, I completely agree. Jessica, hopefully next time I speak to you, there will be a resolution and we'll find out more about what is actually going on. Thank you for joining me. Jessica Boehm there, Axios Phoenix reporter in Arizona. Isn't it fascinating? What a story. Right. Stay where you are because we're going to be going through the newspapers in just a moment.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, and a good evening to you. This is Petrie here with you through until 1 o'clock. And coming up at midnight, so in an hour's time, I want to talk to you about 16-year-olds voting. This is the biggest reform to our democracy in half a century. This is according to the IPPR. Responding to the Representation of the People Bill, the power and influence are distributed unequally in British society. Too many people feel locked out of the political process, which often favours the powerful and wealthy. At the last election, only 1 in 2 people voted. We are trapped in a doom loop of how turnout is unresponsive to government. The bill is a significant step forward to break out of that. It represents the biggest reform to our electoral system in half a century, reducing the grip of the powerful and giving greater voice to those who go unheard. This is to reduce the voting age to 16. So the election bills goes forward tomorrow. Now, I wasn't able to report that directly because it's embargoed till midnight, but this was embargoed until 10:30, so I can say what I like now. So it's going forward. It's going forward that 16-year-olds will be allowed to vote. They already can in some parts of the country, but in UK elections, in the big elections, they're not allowed to vote here at all. In the English elections, they're not allowed to vote at all. This is reducing the age to 16. And I want to know if you think that 16-year-olds really should have the vote. I mean, maybe they are older these days. You know, people go, oh, a 16-year-old is much older these days. Are they? But are they wiser? Do they understand the power of a vote? Will they even use it? I suppose they should if it's about youth jobs or youth employment or being able to buy a house any time in their lifetime. So maybe they should get the vote. Maybe that will concentrate the minds of the politicians. But you can't avoid the very real situation that this is being brought forward by a Labour government. Every single statistical analysis of every single election ever held shows that the younger the person, the more likely they are to vote towards the left. The older they are more likely to vote to the right. It is as simple as that. And so the idea that Labour have brought this in, there's a lot of people suggesting that this is gerrymandering of some degree, that this is actually just trying to make sure that Labour doesn't lose its grip because younger people tend to be more ideological, not like us oldies who are a bit bitter. Seen it all, got the T-shirt, washed it, thrown it away. You know, we've seen Labour come and go, we've seen the Tories come and go, so we know really what's going on. So I want to know, do you think that 16-year-olds should be afforded the vote? There's a lot of things that 16-year-olds can't do, but vote they can. But they're still not adults. They still won't be considered as adults. And what's interesting about that is that 16-year-olds can't drive. They're not allowed to make decisions around certain things in their lives. They're not allowed to get a tattoo, for example, because they're not considered to have the wherewithal to make that decision that will last a lifetime, right? So we say that on one hand with 16-year-olds, but on the other hand, we're saying that they're old enough to cast a vote. So I'd just be interested to see what you think about that. What were you like at 16? What were your kids like at 16? Do you think that 16 is the age that children, because they are children, should start to vote? 03444 499 1000. Calls are charged at national rate, but we do call you back. And you can send me a message by putting the word talk and then your message to 87222. Well, with me in the studio is Simon Diggins, retired colonel from the British Army and also the host of, what's it? I haven't got my notes in front of me. Superpowers.
Superpowers Exposed.
Superpowers Exposed. Absolutely brilliant. So, Simon, I saw you sort of nodding and shaking your head there. What do you think of 16-year-olds being able to vote?
I've got a couple of thoughts. One is the fact that we were coming up to the 250th anniversary of the foundation of the American Republic, and one of the great cries they had was no taxation without representation. I think we should invert that and say, basically no representation without. In other words, if you're not being taxed, you shouldn't get a chance to be a representative. As you quite rightly said, if you are a 16-year-old, there are things you still can't do or you need to get permission to go and do. Your vote could deploy somebody on operations which you can't go on and won't go on. And I think it's that mismatch between giving them a vote, which I think rightly say is probably more to do with political reasons, and actually the reality, which I think is what worries me. I think there's a compromise. I think the compromise could be, for example, local elections. I think there also needs to be a substantial programme of education, constitutional education. The Americans got a good line in this. They call it active citizenship, and it's a very old idea, but they have a really good line in it. And they teach ethics, and they teach the Constitution in their schools. And it's not just politics. It is really about how society works, how the government works, how politics works. So if we are going to go down this route, I think it's probably a mistake, but if we are going to go down this route, what I'd like to see is a really substantial effort to try and ensure our 16-year-olds are well educated and understand the responsibility, the real responsibility they have, because they could find themselves voting for a party that sends people to war, which they can't go on themselves and won't be allowed to go on until they're 18.
Yeah, they wouldn't be called up. The thing is, a lot of people also would take issue with. I hear it all the time that a lot of teachers are very left-wing, and are likely to teach in that vein, if you like. So again, it's very difficult to imagine forced balance, if you like, in terms of politics. And
I think they need to do that. There needs to be a real responsibility. I think the thing about the progressive cause is it's very easy to say because it's all about change and making difference. Actually, a conservative approach can also be about change, but it's change in tune with the history, the traditions, the culture of the country. And so again, you rightly say that if we're going to have this happen and it's going to be educated through schools, we absolutely need to ensure that the curriculum that's offered and the people who are teaching the curriculum teach it in a way that is genuinely balanced to give both sides of the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the young people should be more politically engaged, because it does matter. Like I said, if they ever want to own a house in their lives, if they ever want proper jobs in their lives, then engaging in politics is the only way they're going to try to make sure that happens. But I mean, as you say, at 16, you can join the military at 17, can't you?
You join the military at 17. You can start,
but you can't go on the front line.
You can't go. You can't be deployed till you're minimum of 18. And often there's a practical thing around probably 19 before you're actually allowed to deploy. Because that changed. I mean, we did have, very sadly, the first casualty in the first Gulf War was a 17-year-old, which is horrific to think about, and that changed from there. But I think that's part of the equation. If you go to full citizenship, is the right to bear arms, the right to defend your country, along with it is the chance to vote, or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, and it's also to do with an understanding of paying bills.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just as simple as that.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that when my son moved out and got his own place and everything, he's like, oh, this adulting stuff sucks big time. And I said, yeah, no, it doesn't get any easier either.
Well, no, I mean, the whole phrase adulting, I only heard from my sons about 5 years ago. And I was looking at them and just thinking, what are you talking about? And it was exactly that. They suddenly were no longer students. They were suddenly finding themselves in a position where they had to pay their own bills, and and there was nobody around to dig them out in the deep
or organise their doctor's appointments.
Absolutely. They suddenly had to get on with it.
I think I still organise my sons.
Yeah, and they sort of resent it. You hear them talking about,
It's like you kept it a secret
Yeah,
from them.
exactly. Well, I'm doing some adulting. Ooh, like it's keeping me away from real life. Whereas for most of us, it's just what you do, along with everything else you do as
exactly.
well.
And I don't mean to be patronising towards 16-year-olds, because maybe they are a bit older than we were when we were 16. They've got more access to things that we didn't have, and information and things like that through their phones and online. But I don't think that makes you wiser.
No.
You know,
I think that's right, but that's where the education could come in. You could have a civics test, as Americans do. You know, you prove you've got the maturity to go and vote. But I think the thing that's missing about the whole debate is, you know, for those people who are able to vote, 18-year-olds plus, they're not voting either.
No.
So what? Why is it? So 18 to 25, 25 to 35-year-olds are not voting. I mean, because that's nothing to do with the age of the lower age limit. That's to do with their sense of where their politics are, their sense of where the growth is. And I don't think that this is going to make any difference to that. That's what our current generation of politicians need to address. Why is it our young people, our future, feel so disillusioned and feel that it makes no difference that they don't bother voting?
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good point, and that is the point, isn't it? That people are so disconnected from politics and feel, I mean, and this latest shower is not making it any better for anyone, is it, really? But you know, people are not voting, and because of that, we're seeing these massive majorities on very slim voting.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Starmer the other day talking about he had this majority
mandate.
He had mandate. You know, basically everybody ran away from the Tories.
Yeah.
You know, and there was nothing left but it was anyone but Tories. So he got this massive majority. But you know, he had the lowest popular vote of any.
Yeah, it's on 33% of the vote.
Exactly.
Exactly, and he talks about this mandate as if everybody in the country voted for him. And they didn't. But it you know, you can't step away from the fact that lowering the age does play well for Labour.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And the Greens.
Well, I mean, and I think that's the other thing that's been very sad. We've seen not just this element of kind of potentially structural gerrymandering going on, but there's been enormous reluctance to reorganise the constituencies. I mean, the argument about reorganising constituencies has been going on for nearly 10, 15 years, and they still haven't reorganised the constituencies. That's something that, frankly, should be out of the hands of politicians. That should simply be an electoral commission that says, you know, the size of the constituency should be 100,000, which I think is the estimate. It no longer is in that area there. Then we reorganise it, and they really don't have a choice. But they've postponed it because they could see, you know, a party political advantage in postponing.
Particularly in London.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Where they have got the advantage for that. So new rules set out in the Representation of the People Bill to be introduced on the 12th of February, that's tomorrow, will extend voting rights in the UK elections to 16 and 17-year-olds. So it is going to happen. Give me a call. Do you think that that's a good thing? Or do you think that that is just political gerrymandering? Give me a call, 0344 499 1000. Going to take a quick break, but Simon, I'll be back in just a moment.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock. And with me, Simon Diggins, and we're digging into the front pages. Not actually into the papers, because we've only got the front pages. But Simon, let's have a look at the Times. The PM knew his peerage pick had backed a sex offender. Sir Keir Starmer nominated a former advisor for a peerage despite being told he'd provided a paedophile counsellor with support because he believed in his innocence. This paedophile counsellor went on to plead guilty.
Yeah, I think there's an element of kind of naivety with Sir Keir, rather than just kind of irrelevance or not really noticing what's going on. I'd like to think it's more naivety than malice, but there's a kind of indifference to what the mood of the people, the mood of the country, the real concern over child sex offenders across the piece. And I think that's the real challenge. Why didn't you pick that up? And again, we've got this somebody else to blame. Somebody else
didn't tell him the truth.
Didn't tell him, didn't advise him. You are the Prime Minister. You get to decide.
And an ex-barrister.
Yeah, ex-barrister.
QC.
Absolutely. Where are his political antennae to all these things? And the argument is that Lord Doyle believed this man to be innocent. And of course, we have had accusations of people who are accused. We've had a previous head of the armed forces, Field Marshal Lord Bramwell, was accused of this. So it is perfectly legitimate to say, I'm going to stand by you because I believe this to be an outrageous falsehood. He shouldn't be blamed for doing that. But there's a timing issue with this, and maybe the answer to is pull off on this. It wouldn't matter if Lord Doyle then became a peer 6 months later or a year later. Well, an investigation is carried out to absolutely ascertain the facts, and I think that's the challenge. It's either naivety, if you've been kind, or frankly indifference to this, and somewhere online as well, no political antenna. Where's that finger, that touchy finger?
That's what worries me. If he's entering into deals on our behalf, or if he's discussing war plans on our behalf, does he know who he's talking to? Does he have a clue what they're thinking? Does he have that political antenna? That is important.
Yeah, I don't think he does. I think his antennae, if insofar as he's got any antennae at all, are all around law and international law, which is a dry subject. And also, he's got this vision of this international law being something that stands alone, where in fact it's simply what the great powers, we used to be one
agree
of them,
to.
Agree to. And for
whether
as long,
they want to or not.
Yeah, for as long as it suits them to go and do that.
Yeah.
But he's elevated to sort of iconic status, believes that it's all powerful, and I think that's the limit of his perception. I think he's genuinely confused that people find for example, his deal on the Chagos Islands to be outrageous. He just doesn't get it. That this is handing islands that don't belong to a country to another country. Oh, and by the way, paying that country to look after them. And he goes, well, an international court of justice made a advisory judgment, and so what? It was an advisory judgment, and the International Court of Justice quite specifically says Commonwealth to Commonwealth discussions are outside its jurisdiction, but yet he puts that higher than that, and that's a lack of something.
Well, he certainly has, I think, proved that he's not in touch with the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
He just doesn't seem to have the language or the scope.
I think he's embarrassed by us. I think he's embarrassed by people who believe in this country, who believe this country can be a great place to live in, who believe that its virtues of tolerance. He occasionally uses the words, but everything to. So when he decided to wrap the Labour Party in the Union Jack, it was like, right, my communications advisor, what I haven't just sacked, said we're going to put Union Jacks up all around the Labour Party hall. But you didn't sense that it was this surge of patriotism, and we've got frankly, there's a really wonderful kind of radical tradition in this country which he could have talked to and appealed to, which is also part of our history. But you didn't get a sense of that. He hasn't. His roots are are surface thin. He has no ability to even to reach back into kind of the roots of radicalism that we've got in this country as well. He doesn't get it at all, I think is the way I'd put it.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. But I mean, the other thing I suppose we have to say that being friends with a paedophile is not against the law. I mean, it's morally reprehensible, I would suggest. Yeah. But it is in itself not a crime. Talking of being friends with a paedophile, Prince Andrew, or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is on the front page. This photographer would have been thrilled with that picture. A great picture there. Police are now assessing Andrew's leaks to Epstein. Police examining Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein have spoken to prosecutors and are assessing whether there is a case for misconduct in public office. This alludes to not the alleged relationship with Jeffrey or anything else, but when he was trade envoy, which he was for I think 10 years or something, that he was handing state secrets, if you like, across to Epstein.
Yeah, an extraordinary, if that's true, and of course it's to be investigated at the moment, an extraordinary allegation and a complete dereliction of his duty in terms of what he needed to be doing. The challenge is, what do you do with someone like him? I mean, he was the spare of his era, and having had a reasonably competent naval career, which he could have continued, that's what he should have done, because that's probably his level of competence.
Yeah.
But they made him trade envoy, which meant he had access to sort of commercially confident secrets, talking about what was going on in Afghanistan, uranium and gold. And I remember, because it was 2010, I was there at the time, there was a lot of conversations going on about what was available inside Afghanistan. It was extraordinarily sensitive information. The Chinese were taking positions, knowing that it might be 50 years before they could do it, but they're buying out 50-year stakes. Now, that kind of information to someone like Epstein or his cohorts or people who were talking to him would have been extremely valuable, and he had absolutely no business passing that information, if that's what he's done, to them. Whether it meets a criminal threshold is hard to tell, but in terms of judgment, again, and also this sort of sense of who am I loyal to?
Yeah, is it the country, or is it to the paedophile?
Well, exactly. Yeah.
And the other thing is, of course, with Mandelson, a very similar investigation going on into emails that he sent when he was in a privileged position and sharing sensitive economic information with the likes of Epstein, who was sharing it with JP Morgan, I believe. Yeah. But what's source for one is source for the other, isn't it? It's source for the gander. So if Mandelson goes down for it, and it's a similar thing, and it can be proved, then it's a constitutional nightmare.
We've got a crisis on our hand. A potentially member of the royal family who is judged to be a significant criminal. I mean, they've been found guilty of things before. I mean, the Princess Anne, God bless her, used to be regularly caught for her speeding, and she's appeared in front of
speeding and her dogs.
Yes, Westminster Magistrates Court with her. We're very familiar. We're very familiar people. But no, this would
be quite serious.
This is a different. This is a different league. I mean, royal families have had crises in the past, so maybe they can roll through it. But I rather hope, particularly, I think King Charles has been absolutely right and very clear about what's going on. But I do hope Prince William is looking on and thinking, how am I going to bring my children up, not just to be royal, but actually that they don't find themselves in a place where the temptation to be a kind of celebrity and drift into that kind of celebrity circle. Like Harry, God bless him. It becomes greater than the opportunity to go and work about.
Yeah.
Other monarchies have managed it. I mean, there are other monarchies in Europe, and they've got, they don't just have one child; they have several, and their sons and daughters who are not in the direct.
Well, Princess Anne's kids, because she said,
she said that's
there's no titles, nothing. You're on your own.
Get on with your life.
And they've done brilliantly.
And they've done very well too.
Yeah, they really have. It says here, Lord Mandelson, the former ambassador to the US, faces an investigation relating to the same alleged offence, which carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. Andrew and Mandelson, of course, have denied any wrongdoing. So that is being investigated by police at the moment. The other story there, this is Jim Ratcliffe, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, the owner, of Manchester United, said that Britain has been colonised by immigrants who are costing too much money. Ratcliffe has founded the global chemicals company Ineos Group, blamed the poor economy on immigration and the large number of people claiming benefits.
Yeah, I think he's waded into this debate, and there is an argument around about whether we've got the balance right in terms of welfare, the number of people who are claiming benefits, which is, I think the figures are something like 6.8 million people in this country who are claiming benefits, out of work benefits, which seems a lot. And at the same time, you have high immigration, so that feels out of kilter. But I think what he's also done is he's managed to muddle the figures up, and that really just opens up people to knock him down. And as someone has also quite rightly pointed out, have a look at the Man United front line. How many of those are immigrants? So yeah, there is a conversation that needs to be had, and I think a very proper conversation about the balance between about these things. But actually, if you're going to get involved in this, make sure you get your facts right.
Make sure you get your facts right. Well, earlier tonight, Sir Keir Starmer labelled comments about immigration made by the billionaire Manchester United co-owner Sir Jim Ratcliffe as offensive and wrong. But he mustn't shut down those conversations, and I think that's the mistake he makes as well. That's
the mistake he makes. So this is the if people want to know why people are becoming radicalised around these issues, it's because proper conversations about these issues
are shut down.
Are just shut down. I mean, I personal story. I actually stood for Labour in 2015, and when I was doing all the hustings, we had various hustings around the constituency. We were not allowed to discuss immigration. Now that was bubbling underneath the surface because it was like a sort of a taboo subject. The uni parties, Reform Cause, the Tories and the Labour had basically decided amongst themselves they were not going to allow this conversation to take place. But the issue was there, and it was live then. It doesn't help labelling it offensive. But Radcliffe's got this wrong. But if you are going to get involved, make sure you got
your numbers right.
You get your numbers right and your facts right.
Yes, then you're in the clear.
You have a stake, yeah.
But also for the Prime Minister to constantly try to shut down any discourse or to try to shut down and this is why Reform is doing so well.
Absolutely.
Because they are having the conversation that nobody else will have. Yeah. And of course then it's left to their narrative completely, and they won't listen to anyone else. No. So that is the problem, isn't it? Let's have a look at the Telegraph. Labour up for closer ties with Europe. I mean, Rachel Reeves has been saying that, look, we may have got these good deals with India and the US, but they are nothing compared with the market that is the EU. That even the deals that we've done post-Brexit are nothing like the amount of money we could make if we had closer ties, not rejoined, but had closer ties.
Yeah, I think they're desperately looking for something to kick-start growth. But the reality of life is slightly different. I mean, the finance people, even for all of 400 metres from where we're speaking at the moment, will tell you they've done more business post-Brexit than before. Now, I mean, I opposed Brexit at the time, but I think if you are going to push for closer ties, you need to be careful about what you're asking for, because look at what the Europeans are doing over something which should be eminently sensible. The defence plan that they've got there, our price of entry simply to be allowed to borrow and get involved in there is extremely high.
It's $1 billion, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And and that's for something which should be in everybody's interest. You basically make sure.
Well, we've got the nuclear weapons as well, so they need to be nicer to us.
They do, and I think that's the difficulty. Any change we might want in order to have closer ties with Europe is going to come at a very, very high price. And so simply labelling it, we're going to have closer ties with Europe, I think is wrong. I am delighted that we've sorted out the Erasmus scholarship, because again, same for young people.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. And those are the kind of things we can do.
Well, we did throw several babies out with the bathwater.
Oh, totally.
And if we can get at least that back online. And look, I think the future of defence for us is that we are safer with them defence-wise than we are without them. We are a tiny little island with barely a military to speak of. Yeah. So, we do need to be much closer ties, certainly in terms of defence.
No, absolutely, and we did. I mean, there were aircraft that we built together, the Jaguar, the fighter aircraft, the Anglo-French aircraft, sitting outside of NATO, and that was a time in France was semi-detached from NATO as well. We're also at the moment operating in the and your previous speaker Keir Giles was talking about the high north and the Arctic. Norway, of course, is a European country that's not part of the European Union. So there's lots of ways in which us and European countries, where they've been members of the European
can be closer
together, and indeed should be closer together, and that's what we should be looking to try and do. But simply looking for this as a kind of a get out of Brexit, fix it, which I think is what Rachel Reeves is after, I think is nonsense. And again, is that the mood of the country isn't there.
No.
I think regardless,
it would be seen as traitorous.
I think so. I mean, it's naive, basically.
Well, I just don't know how they're missing what the public are thinking. I honestly don't understand it. They should do a phone-in. They should just host a phone-in. They'll find out what the public are thinking straight away.
I think they are so tied up in their own politics, and because they're professional politicians, the majority of them.
Yeah.
They started as kind of researchers aged 21, 22, and have gone on ever since. They just don't. They
don't live in the real world.
They do not live in the real world.
They absolutely don't. No. And it is clearer and clearer day in and day out that they just don't get it. Right, we've got to take a quick break, but we will be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk and it's Petrie here with you until 1 o'clock, and with me in the studio Simon Diggins, retired colonel and host of the Sun's Superpowers Exposed series, and we're looking at the papers. Just before we turn the page on the Daily Telegraph, tax raids means your pint is getting weaker. Brewers are making weaker pints of beer to save costs. I didn't think they were allowed to do that.
I think, as I understand it, tax on alcohol has always been based on the strength, which is why there are various kind of marker points where they go. So they've always, this goes right the way back to sort of the good old days when the customs men kind of knocking around checking out your barrel. So they're looking at it. It's a bit like the sort of smaller Mars bars we now get in shops and things like that. So they're going to make the big exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's a shame because you'll just have to buy more of them, I suppose. That is the idea. Yeah. The Independent, furious. Women MPs turn on Starmer over boys' club scandals. This is all Labour women and MPs are sick and tired of not being listened to by Keir Starmer, and they want to transform the political culture in government around women and girls. I mean, Labour doesn't have the best reputation for how it treats women. No. Certainly, they've never had a female leader. But the whole thing about the boys' club, which was Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer and a cohort of young lads that would sit around and discuss things, and they just were not listening to the women in the room. I can't believe this still goes on. Well, I can. But I mean,
I'm probably the last person to even ask about this. But let's come from a I think
from a military background.
From a military background, I think the complaint that women aren't listened to is absolutely real.
Yeah,
I think that, and I was taught this. One of the ways to get women to talk is, but you have to. It's kind of active chairmanship, or in terms of what you're doing. So if you with an audience of women, the first 3 questions when they're allowed to ask, you give those to the women, and then the balance starts to run. But as you rightly say, when the real challenge within the Labour Party is, regardless you think of their politics or how they performed, they've never had a single leader. It was a shame that Harriet Harman, when she was a deputy, did not put her name forward to be a prime minister. I think she would have made a very good prime minister.
I do too.
And a very good leader of the Labour Party, but she chose not to. And I think that's a shame. I think because the other front runners that they've got, Rayner and Reeves,
No, I'm not a fan. No, but Harriet Harman, you're right. I mean, she's been around a long time. She knows the system, and she's also got a support base, which is more than Keir Starmer has. Kemi Badenoch, though, accused Sir Keir of stuffing government with hypocrites and paedophile apologists.
Yeah, I think that's well, it's
She's come through though, Kemi, hasn't she? She's really changed.
Yeah.
It seems like she's just found her feet. I mean, it's extraordinary.
She had a very good conference last year, and I think getting rid of Robert Jenrick, was what you need to kind of.
He was a wet blanket, wasn't he? He was known as Robert Generic.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah. The other story on the front of the Independent, this absolute tragedy. Canada. Talking about the shooting, the school shooting. We don't know much information about it at this stage, but the suspected shooter was found dead. But this is so unusual in Canada. It's like if it happened here, because they've got very strict gun laws there.
They have. They have
more guns.
They have more guns.
Because they've got more countryside.
They've got more countryside. I mean, it's a bit like our farming areas where they were. I do remember a few years ago looking at the comparison where you looked at the difference in sort of Detroit and you crossed the
I know.
You went into Windsor in Ontario, and very actually funny at the same time they had very similar levels of gun ownership in terms of number of people, but the homicide rate was completely different. The culture is not in Canada a gun culture.
No.
It's guns for a reason, and it's we're big wild country, so people have got guns, but not that kind of homicidal approach. So horrible tragedy. I think maybe more comparison with the kind of Lockerbie, sort of the Lockerbie tragedy that we had.
Absolutely,
I think that's
where there's that shock, and I think
there's a
there
shock
will
anxiety rather than the rather sad drumbeat of school shootings.
And you know that Canada will, if it can, now tighten its laws and change its laws in the same way that we did. I mean, we completely got rid of personal handheld weapons just for the fun of it, and that's the difference, isn't it? That America steadfastly refuses, after school shooting upon school shooting, to change anything. Except more guns for teachers, apparently, and
so have a
like
shootout in classroom.
Yeah,
but we haven't completely lost it. I mean, I was slightly surprised and shocked the other day when I was talking to my daughters, and they were talking about being taught about evacuations inside schools, in this country. So the potential of a threat. So it's taken seriously enough for people to be taught. They're taught what to do, and they've got different signals
with guns.
No,
knives.
Some kind of threat. But they're taught different signals. One is an evacuation, which the old fire alarm, which we were all used to from the good old days. But they're now taught an evacuation drill, which means you don't leave the classroom until you're directed, and then the people take charge. So I think people are taking it seriously, and that's very sad.
So to lock the doors and stay put.
Lock the doors, stay put, and you're then given instructions by the teachers. And in many cases, the safest thing to do is stay where you are under the control and not go out into the open. So sadly, that kind of poison has spread over here, or people are worried that the poison may spread over here. But that's something which is
well, it's good to know that they're being taught.
They're being taught how to do it.
How to cope with that.
I was a little surprised, but yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so the Mirror, this is shameful, it says, outrage at Prem boss, fury at Man United chiefs, UK colonised by immigrants rant. I mean, when you consider where most of the football players come from. They're the children of immigrants or immigrants, or most of the best footballers probably in Man United will be immigrants. So it's a very strange thing for him to wade into, really.
Yeah, I think have the debate, but if you're going to get involved, make sure you get your facts.
Get it right. Yeah. The Daily Star has gone with exactly the same story. Man United gym, racism storm, and why way into politics? Anyway, look, he's... oh my goodness me, I've just seen that. The Dawson's Creek star, dead at the age of 48.
That's a tragedy again, isn't it?
James Van Der Beek. I used to absolutely love him.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's sad. Apparently he'd been ill for a few years. Goodness me, really young that is. That's really sad, actually. I was a big fan of Dawson's Creek. Watched it a lot. Did anybody else? No?
I fear not.
No. No. Yeah. I knew you would, son. I knew you would. So yeah, that's really sad. Well, 48 years old. That's a proper tragedy, isn't it? When you look at things like that. Let's have a look at the Metro before we go to a break. I don't know. I mean, I sound like one of those old women over a garden fence. I don't know what you have to do these days to go to prison. 2 years skipping £3,600 worth of fares, but no jail. Jammy Dodger, it's called. Judge decides the brazen offender might change.
Yeah, I think that's most unlikely. I did notice he's also been given some community orders. I mean, whether prison would make any difference, I don't know. I mean, there is a huge issue
but part of this has to be punishment.
Sure.
There has to be punishment. We're also, allergic to punishing people.
Yeah, I'm not allergic to punishing people at all. I just wonder whether prison make any difference. But actually, if he doubled or tripled the amount of community service he got, so basically he had to work for his living, I think he's been given 150 hours community service. Make that 450 hours. Basically, then I think that would make a difference to him, rather than putting him in prison for 3 or 4 months. I mean, there is an issue about this, and it's not just it's a middle class crime as well. I think it's South West trains. Their biggest challenge is people getting on the train without paying, and then when they're online and they've gone down the line 2 or 3 stops, then they buy an online ticket. So by the time the inspector comes on board, they've got a valid ticket, but they've got no record of where they got on before. And in fact, they've done that. Sorry, that's probably passing how not to.
We don't recommend that.
We don't recommend it because they're onto it. But that's it. So I think there is a whole issue about fare dodging.
And it's so unfair for everybody else who pays,
we're all
isn't it?
paying.
Yeah.
It's like insurance. It's basically like insurance fraud.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all suffer because they're selfish about it.
But is he going to have to pay this back?
I have no idea. I would hope so. I'd hope so.
But they've waived prosecution costs as well as repaying the $3,629.
So I suspect he's got no money.
Yeah, but then what's the deterrent?
That's why I'd take.
What's the deterrent? The next person who goes, well, I've got no money, I won't have to pay that back. Yeah. It's $3,500. That's a lot of money to me. So I'm just going to fare dodge, and all I'm going to get is a few hours of community service.
Well, making lots of hours of community service.
Yeah. But that is absolutely ridiculous. Honestly, this is why we're in the mess we're in today. That's what I say. The Guardian as well, showing that picture of James Van Der Beek dying at the age of 48. I don't know how I didn't see that story earlier. I must have just slipped me by. That's on the front of the Guardian. Select female deputy to end the boys' club in number 10. Female Labour MPs have demanded that Keir Starmer appoint a senior woman as his de facto deputy to oversee a complete culture change. Well, didn't he have Angela Rayner there?
Had Angela Rayner there. Harriet Harman was a deputy. I mean, I think the culture does need change. It does need addressing. Cultural change takes a lot longer than an appointment. What are the plans? Gordon Brown's waded into the debate somewhere, as I heard him on the radio this evening, and he's done an article, I think, in the New Statesman. He talks about a structural misogyny. I'm not entirely sure that's a very helpful way to do it, but I think the issue of misogyny, I think, is genuine and real, and I think needs to be approached and addressed.
Yeah, I mean, it just. It's very difficult to break that, though, because, you know, if a lot of men don't know they're being
I think
misogynistic, they don't, and they wouldn't hold their hand up to it,
No.
you know, if they were accused of it. But there's those subtle signs of misogyny that us women know only too well, but that men don't even know they're doing. So it's a very difficult one to break.
Well, they're guilty as charged.
Yeah. Pellico recalls the moment police told her of rapes. This is Giselle Pellico, if you remember, became a global symbol of courage during the trial of her ex-husband and the dozens of men who raped her while she was unconscious, while she was drugged by her husband. She described the shock when police first showed her images of the crime, likening herself to a rag doll. This is from a forthcoming memoir, A Hymn to Life. I mean, she was, what an extraordinary woman, waiving her right to anonymity, just so that these men were taken to court, because she was offered anonymity. But if she'd taken anonymity, then the likelihood of all of these men being tried and found guilty would have been slim. So she waived it to make sure that justice was done. But can you imagine the shock? Someone you're married to and you love.
Yeah.
And then you find out they've been doing this to you. Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shocking.
Yeah.
She considered her husband a great guy after 50 years together. That's going to be one hell of a book. I'm going to read that. I think that'd be really good. Right, quick break, and Simon and I'll be back in just a moment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, this is Talk, and it is Petrie here with you, and with me, Simon Diggins, retired British Colonel and host of the Sun's Superpowers Exposed series. Let's turn our attention to the Sun newspaper, and this is a royal exclusive, which I did not know, that apparently Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was loaned £12 million for the Virginia Giuffre payoff by the Queen Philip and Charles loaned. Well, he hasn't paid anything back, but he can't pay the Queen and Philip back, right? Because they're both dead. But it was a loan of 12 million. Yeah,
that's very absolute news to me as well. But I think this goes to the heart of one of the challenges we've got with the royal family. And I'm a proud royalist. But this is an issue of transparency. And but particularly around their finances, it's not just the money they get voted every year, but also the finances of the Duchy of Cornwall, the Duchy of Lancaster, both of which there's a kind of obscure relationship with the Treasury. And I think, given the challenges we've now got, given, if you like, what lack of transparency has shown to do, and with what Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has got himself up to, or is alleged to have got himself up to, I think one of the changes they need to make is actually to accept that there needs to be transparency about what they're doing. The kind of the sense of the old thing, the divinity doth hedge a king, and you don't rip down the hedge, I think is gone. And if the monarchy is survive, and I do hope it does survive and thrive, then I think it's got to be on a different basis for
I agree. I think there's a tipping point, isn't there? The late Queen is said to have stumped up 7 million. With another 3 million coming from Prince Philip's estate. So I suppose they could pay the estate back after his death. And some 1.5 million was paid by then Prince Charles, with other royals also chipping in to stop Miss Guthrie's sexual abuse case. Andrew has not paid back a penny. Well, he's not working, so how is he going to pay back a penny? He's living off his brother's dime, isn't he?
He is, but I think that's one of the reasons why I think, as much as any reason, Charles was so irritated with him and kicked him out of the Royal Lodge, which was, again, he hadn't, he paid his money up front for that, but since then hadn't paid for the proper maintenance thing. So, I mean, but he and of course his former wife, Sarah herself, who again is on the scrounge around the houses.
Always on the scrounge. I mean, apparently she wants to come back to public life.
Yeah.
The barefaced cheek. Talk about being out of touch.
That's it. I mean, if you've lived in this kind of flunky-driven world where everything happens for you, and you've got your own personal assistants, and you've got your PR person, and you've got your personal dresser, and she ordered breakfast to be held in 4 different places, and then she'd go to whichever suited it. That kind of gross extravagance.
It's just disgusting, isn't it? Especially when she was borrowing and stealing money. Well, not stealing it, but begging and borrowing
absolutely,
it. Right? From whoever she could. Yeah. Epstein and begging for money. I mean, it's just...
No, it's obscene.
And the fact that she honestly thinks she can come back to public life is so tone deaf that I don't even know, I haven't got the words for it.
No,
I mean she will not be welcome.
No, I mean, there was the comparison made the other day about where this scandal sits in the kind of scale of scandals, and one of the ones was with the Profumo scandal. Look what Jack Profumo did. He basically disappeared into the world of poor people in the East End, and he basically spent 30 years rehabilitating himself. And
working on charities.
The rest of it. That's what they need to go and do.
Yeah. Can't see that. I cannot see that. I mean, Fergie's love of money is what's got them into this. All the other scandals she's been involved in as well. Crazy, absolutely crazy stuff. The Daily Express, Jim Ratcliffe says new arrivals to Britain are costing too much money. We've already covered that one. And the PM accused of giving power to paedophile apologists, accused, of course, by Kenny Badenoch. And Andrew faces growing police inquiry into Epstein links. Detectives are assessing claims that the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein sent a woman to Windsor for sexual purposes involving the former prince in 2010. That, of course, will be tantamount to trafficking, if that is true, even though the woman was, I believe, 26 years old. Officers investigating Mountbatten Windsor and Lord Mandelson are in talks with prosecutors and US counterparts ahead of a possible criminal probe, and files suggesting Andrew leaked confidential reports to billionaire Epstein when he was a government trade envoy are also being examined. Thames Valley Police confirmed for the first time they are looking at a case for misconduct in public office. So these are very serious charges. Misconduct in public office carries a life sentence at its most powerful end of that. So that's the papers. You've got some stories from today, though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the first one, the first one is just an obituary, but I just thought it was a really extraordinary one, and the contrast between somebody who lived a really good life. This lady called Lady Jean Wilson, who just died aged 103. She set up Sight Savers. Her husband was blind, but was also a colonial official in the 1940s, and was sent to Ghana to look at how they worked. It was the Gold Coast colony at the time, to look at how they were looking after people. In fact, they weren't. But what they discovered was the major cause of blindness in parts of Gold Coast, now Ghana, was what is now known as river blindness, which is basically a disease that comes from fleas. And they not only they came back to UK, not only did the work with the colonial office, but then set up this organisation, Sight Savers, which just looked after its billionth case.
Wow.
And I think that's extraordinary. And she was absolutely hands-on to it until almost the end of it. So the contrast with somebody who's lived a and someone who's lived a good life, I thought was so marked that we needed to commemorate.
To honour that, yeah. I mean, that's extraordinary, because there are good people in the world.
Absolutely, that's right. And then there's another one which is rather completely different, which is what's going on with the skiing and everything goes on.
The Winter Olympics that nobody's paying any
attention to, except for the food. Which has it's taking place. The food
should be good.
It's magnificent, except for the Russian. There's a Russian called Greg Smolkin who's actually skiing for Georgia, who's complained about the surfeit of pizza and pasta and say this is not good enough. Now the rest of the
what does he want? Potatoes.
He wants potatoes and rice, but the rest of the athletes are about the food is so good and they love the pizza and the pasta so much. They're now demanding it for breakfast, so not just for a sort of lunch and supper meal. They're now serving pasta and pizza for breakfast as well. And there's a South African.
I think pizza for breakfast is quite a cool idea.
I think we've all
I'm not sure pasta.
I think we've all had cold pizza for breakfast in the morning.
I always eat mine before it goes cold.
I'm thinking that the night after you finally get round to
find a piece of pizza stuck to your face.
Well, there's particularly lovely South African athlete who's now completely devoted and demands every day quite a formaggio. He went to the four G's. He can't get enough of it. So the contrast between the South African and Greg Smolkin is quite marked.
Well, I love that. I mean, Gabriella, who's Italian, as you know, my producer, we were looking at the pizza of the year, was it? And it wasn't in Italy. No.
Oh,
I think it was second. The second one was in Rome. But where was the first? I can't remember where it was. But I think the third or fourth was in around here somewhere.
Oh,
So we were looking at that, and Gabriella was deeply offended, fuming that Italy did not take the top spot in the world's favourite pizza competition, but I think it was America.
And I've got one other as well, which is we've just seen a horrible tragedy in Canada, and we should recognise that. But there is a sort of really lovely good news story. It was one of our red robins has crossed the Atlantic and has taken up residence in Montreal.
How do they know it's a British red robin?
Because there's no. His
accent.
His accent, yeah, exactly. Well, no, they do. Of course, birds do have accents.
I know.
They do have accents, but the red robins are not native to North America. The Americans do have robins, but not red robins. And he's taken up residence in the Montreal Park. He's very happy there.
Just on his own, though.
It appears to be on his own. That's what they are worried about, because they're sociable. They're sociable creatures. Nobody knows how he got across there. Whether he was a stowaway.
He must have been a stowaway. That is a long flight for a little bird.
Flight, or just because occasionally we get birds coming the opposite direction as well. So sometimes they get caught by winds and they somehow
Oh, bless him. Well, I hope he's
anyway.
enjoying Canada. I'd like to go to Canada. I think he's done it. He's made a good choice.
I think so.
Top pizza was in New York. There you go.
There we go.
New York, Rome, and London. They're the top. They're the top three. Simon Diggins, thank you very much indeed. British Colonel and host of the Sun's Superpowers Exposed series. Stay where you are. It's the phone in next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning. It is Petrie here with you for the next hour, and this hour is all yours. There's no guests, there's nobody, just you and me. And I want to talk to you about voting age, because new rules set out in the Representation of the People Bill introduced today, February the 12th, will extend voting rights in all UK elections to 16 and 17-year-olds. Lowering the voting age is expected to extend the franchise to 1.7 million more people, keeping the government on track to introduce sweeping changes before the next general election. Responding to the bill, Sir James Cleverly MP said Labour are hopelessly confused on whether 16-year-olds are adults or not. At the same time as proposing to give them the vote, they're also trying to ban them from the perfectly legal activity like buying alcohol-free beer. So is 16 old enough? I mean, I think what Simon was saying earlier was really quite interesting, that they will then be voting potentially for a party that could send people to war that they're too young to go to. That's just one example. You know, if they're not paying a tax at that age, they will be making decisions based on other people's tax bills. They'll be making decisions on other people's interest rate. They'll be making decisions on all sorts of things of which they have no knowledge. And certainly when my boy left home, I think he was 22, 23 when he left home, it was a shock to him that things had to be paid for, because it's not that he was spoiled or anything. It's just that you don't know about council. Why would I say, oh, council tax is, you know, to a 16-year-old? He wouldn't know about that. Of course he wouldn't know about, what's this council tax? Why do I have to pay council tax? What's that for? You know, all of that. So these 16-year-olds were making decisions based on things that they have no knowledge of, that they literally don't know anything about. And you could argue that 18-year-olds don't know much about it either, but that is what we have decided is the age of being an adult, right? So we have decided that is the age at which you become an adult. But 16, is that too young? What were you like at 16? Do you think that 16, I mean, I just think it's a bit nuts, to be honest with you. That even if on basic terms they know that council tax is paid because they're told about it by their parents, they don't know what it is, what it's for, what the policing bill, all of those things. Do they have enough of an understanding of the world to be able to make such an important decision? Now, it is obvious to me why it's a Labour government pushing this through, why the Tories wouldn't touch it with a barge pole, and that is because it is absolutely well documented that the younger the voter, the more idealistic the vote. So more likely, if you like, to go for a socialist government, to go for a Labour government. The older you get, the more likely you are to vote for the Tories, or the more likely you are at least to vote towards the right. So it is no surprise that Labour is keen on this move. The new rules, these are new rules. A Representation of the People's Bill introduced today will extend voting rights in all UK elections to 16 and 17-year-olds. So it's job done, as far as Labour's concerned. But what do you think is the right thing to do? What is the right age to be voting? Look, again, Simon pointed out that there are so many people who are older than that who are not voting at all. Half of us don't bother to vote. 1 in 2 don't bother to vote at all. That's where they should be seeking to improve relationships between government and the people of this country by actually perhaps following through on manifesto promises. That would be a start, wouldn't it? By actually listening to what we're saying to them as opposed to pretending to hear us. It's getting really boring and it's getting really dangerous, because the fewer of us that vote, the more we see the massive majority on a very thin voting basis of people like this Labour government, on 33% of the vote. It is concerning. So why not try and fix why people are not voting in the first place, rather than fishing at the easy end of the pool for votes that you think you might get? Is this political gerrymandering? 0344 499 1000. Calls are charged at the national rate, but we do call you back. And text the word talk and your message to 87222. Let's go to the calls now, and Sarah is in Liverpool. Morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Petrie.
What do you think of this? It's happening.
You know what? It's the most stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I don't mean to be funny, but the only thing most 16-year-olds vote for is whatever's on TikTok or some talent show on the telly if they're watching television. And to be perfectly honest, it's not like years ago when I mean, I'm not that old, but anyone who's a Generation Xer will know that you were brought up with a good, solid base of politics, both left and right, and the pros and cons of both. Be it at home, you got it at home, off the television, through the various news outlets and the documentaries like Panorama, World in Action.
I agree.
That's going back.
Yeah,
you know.
But I'm the same. Yeah, we did have a basic grounding in it.
Yeah, and also you read around the papers as well, not just the ones that your mum and dad had, but also you had the libraries, and you went to the libraries because I know in my old school we used to have mock elections, and they used to prove. I mean, it was only it was just an ordinary girls' school up in Croxteth, and I can remember they said, right, mock elections, and they said one that told lies with the jazz hands, they did the exact opposite of what they were promising. One told the truth, and one sort of told the truth. And the one thing that they proved was everyone went for with the slogans and the jazz hands, and I can remember our head of lower school saying to us, girls, this is a warning. You do not vote for those with the jazz hands and the easy slogans, because they will let you down royally. Don't go near them. And I can remember that. And funnily enough, there was one of them who did have a red nose and shaggy hair as well. It was a mystery how that one came about. But by the by, but it gave us a good lesson on you must look properly at who you're voting for. Yeah. The kids now, they are only taught to test. They are not taught
to think.
They are not educated. It's education. I mean, I've got cousins of mine who are teachers, and the first thing they say is, we'd love to educate the kids properly, but all it is sausage meat education. Throw them through. Teach to test.
They're not taught critical thinking at all. They're not taught to think.
They're not. And we had that all the way through from junior school, infants, juniors, and whatever, at the most basic level. But kids now, when they get to critical thinking, it's only if they go to university. And then, okay, there are a lot of them who do start looking at both sides of an argument, which is great. But there are equally kids who are not getting, who don't think. They just go in their little lane. Whoever's on whoever they like on Facebook or social media, who agree with them. Anyone who doesn't, they don't know how to argue properly. They just go, I hate you, and
no, I completely agree, and I think that is a major problem as well. It's a major issue of where young people do source information and the algorithms that feed them.
That's
and
the problem.
the algorithms that like you said, agree with them. They will only listen to voices that agree with them. They won't listen to. That's why they can't argue. They can't have a debate because they don't think they need to, because they think they're right. And I do think that Gen Xers, we were taught more. We had to think right? And
Oh,
also
God, yeah.
and also we were much more independent, I think, as well. We chucked out the house in the morning and you know, let back in when the street lights came on.
Yeah.
But it, you know, it was a different method, and also you'd sit down to supper and you'd talk with your parents, or talk with your friends' parents, or whatever. It was a different time.
It was, and the other thing is, one of your parents would deliberately take the opposite view of the other, so you'd learn how to debate. Or at least it wasn't in our house, but then again, this was Liverpool. But the one thing I really worry about with the young ones now, there's two things that they've got that have got a grave disadvantage. A lot of them have been brought up with a device in the hand, be it a mobile phone, or they've been glued to a tablet or a computer. Now, unlike years ago, we were one of the last generations if we were plonked in front of the telly for 5 minutes by our parents, we had 4 frames a second. That's what our brains were exposed to. Now, the kids on phones, tablets, computers, they run at about 120 to 200 frames a second, especially as a lot of these internet sites and mobile phones as well, which everyone's got to remember, are designed to be addictive. It's the same technology and the same algorithms that are in one-armed bandits that are in that they've got in the phones and the social media, which is going through at the moment in Europe. And kids now, their brains are totally and utterly rewired from our brains. We're sort of like organic and they're sort of processed, if you know what I mean. And the thing is, because these kids rely so much on going on the internet to find things out instead of, well, I'll read round, I'll watch Dispatches, World in Action, whatever, Panorama, watch the news, read the papers, read various books which you can get in the library, if you've got a library left after the last 15 years. No. First place they go, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, one of those. But the thing is, and this is my big worry with them, is the fact that these kids will believe whatever's there, and they are so easily groomed. I mean, anyone can be groomed, but kids especially so. And with all the bad actors that are around, from Putin with his troll farms in St. Petersburg and Moscow, busy pumping stuff out, which even adults have been caught out on.
Yeah.
And also you've got the other side of the coin, the pseudo-communists putting their view in. And also any other fundamentalist ideology or philosophy, political.
And we know there's political interference.
Yes, and these kids can be so easily manipulated. I mean, so can adults, but kids especially so, because their brains are so plastic. And I just look and I just go, this is so wrong. None of the consequences of this have been thoroughly thought out. This is the thing. Especially Putin, he wants to destroy democracy in the West, and he's doing a very good job in the States. But as well as giving money to populist parties and politicians, he's also using the internet and these troll farms. Anyone who's ever read Shadow State would realise this. He's using the same methods that the KGB did and the Stasi did years ago in the analog days, but applying it to the digital age. And the same with what's going on with Epstein. It was obvious he was a Russian asset, and it was the biggest honey trap out. But anyway, that's another debate for another day. But getting back to this, the kids it can be so easily manipulated by these troll farms. Adults can, because I've heard them trot out these same stuff that's come, when you trace it back, it comes from St. Petersburg. And the kids don't know treacle from tart, more so than any adult. And they will literally be brainwashed.
Well, I mean, especially since
and then realise, oh dear, what have we done? Because some of the kids now are saying, wouldn't it be good to have an authoritarian government?
Yes, I know. We talked about it on this programme. Yeah, they said they would rather have a dictatorship than have to vote. But we've also had a clear indication from America that they intend to interfere with democracy in Europe. So I mean, that's in their national strategy. You can read it. It's absolutely there. I'm not saying something that isn't true. They've made it absolutely clear. So I mean, there are all sorts of worries here. But you know, maybe 16-year-olds are smarter than we think, and maybe it's because we're older. We don't really understand that. I don't know. I was going to say, if you're 16, give me a call, but you'd have to ask your mum. You see, that's ridiculous, right? You can vote, but you can't phone me until you're 18 without your mum's permission or your dad's permission. Crazy. Quick break, back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. Is 16 too young to vote? What were you like as a 16-year-old? A vote is a very important thing. I wish that more people actually respected the vote in this country and used it. But about half of us don't. And that is worrying, because that's what democracy is founded on, right? It is about us participating in politics. And I get it, that what a shower we've got, right? I mean, you're in between the devil and the deep blue sea. With whichever parties you vote for, because they all lie, and that's why people have given up voting. So I would think that actually, apart from just saying we're going to clean up politics, actually do it, actually make some changes, make promises legally binding, make politicians who make promises and don't follow through with them actually responsible for that decision, or for lack of decision. I would say no politician should be allowed to ever abstain from a vote. They are paid to vote. We pay them to vote on issues, so they must look into it, follow their morals and their heart, and make a decision. They should never be allowed to abstain. I think that is a dereliction of duty. And just make sure that they are actually in touch with what the people really want. Because it's just, it is, to me, it is absolutely unbelievable how deaf and blind politicians can be when it comes to what the public are actually trying to make them see or make them hear. That's what I would want to do as a politician, not open it up to another load of people who may or may not even bother voting. Make it so that there's something to vote for, that you feel like you're participating in a change into something that will be good for everybody. Politics in this country is absolutely woeful. I don't think I've ever seen it so bad. Snakebite has said, I don't know about the voting part, Petrie, but when I was 16, I had a Beavis and Butthead kind of attitude on things when it came to war, guns and blowing things up. So I would have gone for the Conservatives, who were all about those things. I am so glad that I don't feel that way now. If I was 16 now, I certainly would be paying more attention to such matters before I'd hit the polls, even though the inevitable would happen. Other people my age would be screaming at me, amongst other names, nerd. But yeah, let the kids vote at 16. Kids are a lot smarter than people like James cleverly seem to think. And yet you at 16 would have made the wrong decision. I mean, like I said, you can't phone a radio station until you're 18, but you can vote. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they are smarter. Maybe I'll be proved wrong. But is it because does Labour want them to vote because they're more likely to vote Labour? In which case, that's political manoeuvring, isn't it? It's gerrymandering the vote. Because if they thought that 16-year-olds, you know, could vote either way, or would they be so keen to bring this in? This is the news that today new rules have been set out in the Representation of the People Bill, introduced today, extending young voting rights in the UK, all elections in the UK, to 16 and 17-year-olds. Andy says, I'd rather let a 16-year-old vote than some doddery 75-year-old who can't remember what day it is. Should there be a maximum age as well? And that's from Andy in North Wales. I'm going to guess your age in the early 30s, I think, because I know a lot of 75-year-olds and they're not in the least bit doddery. Should there be a maximum age as well? I think that if you've got dementia, you're probably not going to vote. I think if you're ill, you're probably not going to vote. But maybe there should be a maximum age, because that would sort out the pensions issue, wouldn't it? Yeah, I don't know whether I agree with that. I don't know. Maybe there should be. Who knows? Right, let's go to Kevin now, who's in Basingstoke. Hello, Kevin. Good morning.
Yeah, morning. I haven't got a problem with 16-year-olds having the vote. You know, there's a lot of intelligent 16-year-olds. I mean, there's a lot of stupid people over 16, isn't there?
Oh, God. Yeah,
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, Brexit, the majority of people over 65 voted for Brexit. Younger people didn't vote for Brexit.
No, they said that if the 16-year-olds had been allowed to vote in that, because there was some talk about 16-year-olds, I think, being allowed to vote in the referendum, then it wouldn't have passed.
No, and I mean, you look what older people have given us. They've given us austerity. You know, public services have been sort of trashed, and you know, so older people haven't got, you know, a great track record. And also, you say about gerrymandering, Jacob Rees-Mogg admitted voter ID was brought in to stop people voting Labour.
Oh yeah, no, they're all at it. I mean, two wrongs don't make a right, right? I mean, they're all at it. They all try to gerrymander, and they try to gerrymander in neighbourhoods as well by changing the social makeup of a neighbourhood, and that has been going on for as long as politicians have demanded votes. So you don't think it's too young? You don't think that a 16-year-old that has very, very little understanding of the world is...
Yeah, but the thing is, if you're not really that interested in politics, you're not going to go and vote anyway, are you? I mean, a lot of young people don't even bother to go and vote in. I mean, a lot of people in general don't bother to vote.
No, I agree with that, and I agree. But you can be interested in politics and be 16, and there's a lot of, like you said, a lot of very smart 16-year-olds. But you don't know about life. You know, you don't know about bills, even paying bills, working for a living. You know, all of those things. And you're making decisions for people who are.
Well, you say you don't know much about life. I mean, they've. Of course, they know about life. They must be able to see which sort of. They can, if they look into it, they can see which sort of political party aligns with their views and
with their ideology, because then it is an ideology, then, isn't it? Because with no real experience, for example, of paying a tax bill or understanding the tax rises that we've had and the implications that has on people's pay packets, because you've never had a pay packet, you could be making decisions based on ideology rather than reality. So you could be making a decision going, well, I think that everybody should pay 50% tax. And then you realise that when you get your pittance from whoever you're working for, that you wouldn't be able to afford to live if that were the case. So it would be ideologically based.
I hear so many older people say things like Labour doesn't grow the economy like the Conservatives. If you look at Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, they grew the economy a hell of a lot more than the 14 years the Conservatives were in power.
That's new Labour. They were, you know, I think everybody, even Tories backed them, I think, at the time. But I think that, I know what you're saying, but I do think that there's something not about the idealism of it, the ideology, in a perfect world, you know, lots of young people like the sound of communism. I mean, there was a poll done recently where the young people in this poll decided they'd prefer to have a dictatorship than a democracy. I remember doing it as a phone-in, which is disastrous, right?
Well, that's because people, they go on X, and people like Elon Musk, they push that narrative that we need to...
Yes, but that's what I'm saying. But if they're pushing that narrative, and there are young children who've never known about war, who've never lived through anything like that, who don't have any understanding of what the country went through, calling for a dictatorship. That concerns me, because I think older people would be able to discern that the nonsense they're being told about a dictatorship is not a good thing.
Well, the thing is with our voting system is not democratic. What's the word? It's not democracy anyway, because I mean, Labour got into power with 34% of the vote.
No, I agree with all of this. I agree with all of this, but I don't.
Of people, their votes don't even count.
Yeah.
We should all go and vote, and we should have proportional representation.
I agree.
So everybody's vote counts.
Yeah, I completely agree. I completely agree with that. But I don't know if opening up the voting to younger voters is going to solve anything. Because, like I said, my fear is that the ideology and reality are two very, very, very different things. And if you've never had to pay a bill or balance your checkbook or, figure out, whether you're going to heat or eat, I don't know if you're in a position, therefore, to be able to cast a vote on behalf of other people, because that's what you would be doing, because it wouldn't impact you. So you're voting on behalf of other people.
The thing is, political parties, they do not sort of pay much attention to young people because they don't vote. And I mean, obviously, 16 or 17-year-olds can't vote. But if younger people were to vote, they would get a better deal than they are at the moment. I mean,
you say that, but what better deal are 18-year-olds getting when they don't even get the same pay as the person sitting next to them on 21 quid an hour? Or more money than them. So you say that, but 18-year-olds do have the vote, because that's where we've decided that the age of majority is, the age of adulthood, but then yet they're paid less minimum wage than a 21-year-old. So,
well, that's why.
So they're not getting any better treatment. And what better treatment do 16-year-olds, should 16-year-olds get anyway? They're supposed to be in education.
Well, I mean, 16. We've got 4 million children living in poverty. If there was when they reach 16, and there's a political party saying that we're going to lift more children out of poverty, they might, they think, well, yeah, that's good. I've got younger brothers and sisters. I would have liked some more help. But I mean, we need compulsory voting. It should be everybody's duty that they should vote. They don't have to vote for a political party. They can go and put a cross through the whole lot of them if they want, but they should go and vote.
I've always said, Kevin, that go and if you want to spoil your ballot, do that. But at least that is counted as a spoilt ballot, and that is a voice. That is something. It's not nothing. So yeah, I do think that everybody should go. I'm not sure about compulsory voting, but I think people should go and just put, like you said, if you don't know or you're not sure.
Why do you not want compulsory voting though? There's lots of other things that we have to do by law. So why not vote?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of government making anything compulsory, frankly. I think they've got enough control on our lives. But what would be a much better way, rather than making it so we have to do it, is to make it so we want to do it. You know, to turn politics around, like you said, give us PR so that we know that our vote counts. Make it, you know, redraw the lines. Make sure that people's vote matter. Make sure that the politicians listen. You know, that's what needs to happen. If you compel somebody to vote in the system that we've got at the moment, what's the point? You know, I mean, I feel almost it's pointless voting in my local constituency because it's always been Labour. And my vote makes absolutely no difference at all. I mean, I happen to really like my local Labour MP. He's a really nice guy, but that is not the way that I choose to vote. But so my vote is nothing. I might as well not turn up, but I always do turn up.
Yeah, well, I think nearly every other country in Europe have proportional representation. You know, we've got, like us and America. Look at America. I mean, it's so divided. Half of them, voted for Trump, and almost half of them didn't. And look what's happened over there.
No, I agree. I think that they've got to get rid of the Electoral College in America, in my view. But there's a lot. But this is what I'm saying to you, Kevin. Rather than just saying, oh, well, the 16-year-olds will fix it, let's make it so that people do feel engaged in politics, that they feel that it matters if they vote, that it feels that there's a political party that will actually listen and not just lie and say, this is what we're going to do, and then not do it. That's why people aren't voting. But I think to compel people is the lazy way.
No, I don't agree. I think Australia think you have to vote. I mean, that's a democracy over there. I mean,
but I think it's government over it. I don't want them compelling us to do anything. I want them to leave us alone. I'm sick and tired of government interference in our lives. I prefer small government and personal responsibility. I'm sick to death of the amount of interference in our lives that there is, and there continues to be. So that's just one step too far for me. And I think it's lazy. And I think just make it so that politics means something to people, and then they're going to want to vote.
But don't you think it would be nice if we lived in a country where everybody that could vote actually did vote for a party that, you know, that's either in power or opposition?
Yes, I do. I think, but that's I would love to live in a country where everybody did vote, but I don't want it to be compelled. Because I think that the governments need to make it so we want to vote.
But if that law did come in time, we would all think, you know, we wouldn't have a problem with it.
Well, that's the trouble, isn't it? Normal. More and more laws, more and more things telling us what we've got to do, and we all just we all roll over and go, oh well, it's just another law. And I don't like it at all. I think that the government overreach is reaching proportions where we don't have a life anymore at all. So we can agree to disagree, Kevin.
Okay.
So I take your point. I would love it if everybody voted. I just don't think compelling them is the right way to do it. Thank you, Kevin. That was great. I love that. I want to take a break. Well, I have to. So I'll be back in a sec.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. This is Talk, and this is Talk Back with me, Petrie, and we're talking about votes for 16-year-olds because new rules set out in the Representation of People Bill introduced today, February 12th, will extend voting rights in all UK elections to 16 and 17 years old. So I'm asking if you think 16 is too young to vote. Tony has just said it will backfire on Labour. A lot of young people think Farage is cool, and then they see Starmer, the charisma of a dead fish. That's rude to dead fish. I've met quite a few dead fish who've been quite charming, but I've met Keir Starmer and I completely agree with you. Ernie says, every 16-year-old I've ever known has always rebelled against whoever tries to control them, whether it's their parents, their teachers or the authorities. So this government has probably got something very wrong again. Are they really that dumb? And then Ernie says, oh, well, that Robin, by the way, is an illegal migrant and should be sent back to Britain in wing cuffs. Yeah, it probably would be if it had landed in America, but it landed in Canada, which is a lovely, friendly country. This is a robin, a bird, that was discovered in Montreal, and they don't have robins in red-breasted robins in Canada, but he's set up home in a park in Montreal, and he seems to be very happy there. A bit lonely for him, but he's ended up in Canada. Like I said, if it was America, whew, he'd be shot out of a tree by now. Right, let's get back to your calls now. Is 16 too young to vote? Michelle is in Dorset. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Petrie. Nice to speak to you.
Nice to speak to you too. Is it too young?
Definitely. I'm glad you were doing this tonight because I emailed my MP later. Not that it would do any good.
Well, you might as well try.
Earlier,
yeah.
Sorry, not later, earlier. And no, I called you later. No, I'm really cross because they don't pay tax. No representation without taxation. No 16-year-old, even if they're working part-time, will earn enough to pay tax because they're still in education. So it really makes me cross.
Yeah, no, I get it. And this is what I was trying to explain to Kevin there, is it, you know, it'll become ideological rather than, realistic. And all of us do look at our tax bills. And, you know, when Labour got voted in, I thought, well, that's that then. You know, we're going to be paying more tax. And what's happened, you know, and tax and spend, and there's another budget coming up and we'll get taxed again.
And the kids will look at it and think, oh, great, the minimum wage has gone up. But people can't afford to employ the youngsters. Exactly.
You know, it's that linear thinking, isn't it, perhaps?
Yeah, and you don't get that till you're older.
No.
And the thing is, they're saying now that they can't, children, their brains haven't developed till they're 25, so, you know, they can't send them, they don't want to try them in court or find them guilty of anything because, they're still children, and then they're saying that they can vote at 16.
Yeah, they're tried as children at 16.
Yeah.
And they will go to a youth offenders
But they usually
place.
let off because they say, their brains aren't developed.
Exactly.
In Scotland, I don't think they even try them under 25. There was a case where a couple of years ago where a guy raped a girl and he was under 25. They said, his brain wasn't developed, and they let him off.
It's so true. So how can both things be true at the same time then?
I know.
And that is for me is just crazy. Like I was saying earlier, you're not allowed to go and have a tattoo.
No.
Because that is a consequential decision that will last for the rest of your life, right?
You can't even buy a lottery ticket,
No.
Petrie.
They used to be able to.
Like you say, can't phone you, can't have a drink, can't go in the pub and buy a drink.
No.
Yet you can vote. Can't drive a car.
It is. All of these things. I think it is madness. I mean, the fact that they can't phone a radio station without parental permission, until I mean, and yet they can vote. They can decide my future.
Yeah. Well, the best of it is they could send us to war, but they can't fight.
Yeah.
Because although they can join the army at 16 with with
parental permission
from their parents, but they can't. I know my husband joined, boys service.
I think it's 17 now. It might even be 17 now.
Well, I don't know because the school age has changed, hasn't it? But my husband went to boys service at 16, and then he joined his regiment at 17, but he couldn't be deployed until he was 18.
Yeah.
I believe they went out to Northern Ireland and he couldn't go, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I mean, that is that generally, and actually, they tend to not even deploy them at that age.
No.
They'll wait until they're 21. But yeah, I mean, it just seems to be so boneheaded. Like you said, it has now been discovered that you know, at 16, your frontal cortex is not developed. You're irrational. And that's, as you said, rightly so, is an excuse used by defence lawyers across the land. You know, their brain hasn't developed. You can't hold them responsible. It's almost like they have a mental illness, you know, or whatever it is. It can't be held responsible, which is why there are different rules for children in court than there are for adults in court. You know, we've seen boys of 15, 16 being allowed to, you know, to wear, asking judges not to put wigs on. And barristers not to put wigs on in case they're upset by it. Do you remember?
No, I didn't know that one.
Yeah. So they all wear suits and they don't wear because it's scary. And yet they're going to be given the vote.
I know. We can't do anything about this, though, Petrie.
Michelle, why aren't you and I running the world?
Oh, God. Well, yeah.
Mind you, I can't be bothered, can you?
No. Well, we'd have had it sorted by now.
That's true.
Now it'd all be sorted out.
We would have had it sorted and be sitting down having a cup of tea and a slice of cake, or a nice gin and tonic. It would all be done.
Oh, I know.
It's bonkers. So you've written already to your.
MP. I'm always writing to. It takes about 2 months to reply, and the replies are just everything that comes out of Starmer's mouth. You know, like the winter fuel. And we are doing this because we can't afford not to. He hasn't got an original thought in his head.
No.
He's Labour. This seat had been Tory since the days of God. And
really?
And then we got this Labour. But mind you, the Tory guy was rubbish.
But that's the point I was making, Michelle, earlier on. Is rather than making us vote, make us want to, right? Make it count.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give us proportional representation. Give us politicians that are not idiots and selfish and arrogant and self-serving. Give us political parties that actually do something, and then we'll want to vote, right?
Yeah, I had a lovely one. I've been here 6, 7 years living here, and I had a lovely Tory MP before, and he was so good. And if I emailed him, I'd get a letter back, proper letter from the House of Commons.
Oh, nice.
By him, addressing Michael Tomlinson, his name was. He was so good, and he would address my concerns directly. And he was great. He lost his seat at the last election, but he was so good. There are some good ones out there.
There are some good ones out there. I mean, Andy Slaughter, who's Labour in my area, he's a brilliant constituency MP. He genuinely is, and he's such a lovely man. He's an absolutely fabulous man. But there's no point I mean, I do vote, away from Labour, but I know it's a wasted vote, but I refuse not to waste it. If you know what I mean, I'm going to go in. I'm going to vote with my conscience, and it's wasted. So there's no point me turning up to vote.
No, it's a funny old system, isn't it, that we've got?
Oh, Michelle, we need to in another world. In another world.
I mean, how could Reform have got more votes than Lib Dems and yet got less seats? It's just
exactly that.
Crazy. It's crazy.
It is absolutely crazy, and it's got to change. But of course, nobody wants to change it because then they'll see the real colour of their skin, right? We'll know exactly what's going on in the country.
Mind you, this proportional representation isn't so good for Europe, is it? They have it the whole time, and then nobody ever makes a decision.
Yeah.
In charge. So it's a double-edged sword.
It is a bit because, like you said, with PR, you end up with a lot of coalitions.
Yeah.
But I think because we're getting to the thin end of voting, of how many people vote, we're going to end up with coalitions anyway.
I think more people will vote next time.
Do you?
I think people are so angry. so angry. We're so impotent, aren't we? They don't care. He doesn't care.
None of them do.
Look at him in, but Starmer's the worst. Look at him in PMQs.
I know.
He won't even look at Kemi. We laughed. My husband laughed.
But it was so funny because she was all lovely and calm, wasn't she? And he was a bit screechy.
Brilliant. She is brilliant. And Ed Davey, wow. I'm surprised at him. He did so well.
I love Ed Davey. I have to be really honest with you. I think he's absolutely brilliant. He's a really good politician. He knows what he's doing.
Some good points, doesn't he?
Yeah. He does.
Yeah.
He really. Oh, I love talking to you, Michelle.
Oh, thank you. I haven't spoken to you before.
It's so lovely. Why have we not spoken before?
I don't know. I will ring you again.
Well, I hope you do. I feel like I'm sitting down with a cup of tea already with you and just having a little chat. I love it. That's exactly what I want.
You.
Call again, won't
I
you?
can't match Georgina. Does Georgina ring you? I can't remember.
Yes.
Does she ring you, Georgina? Yeah. Well, no one can match her, can they?
Well, you certainly have, Michelle. I'm not going to forget.
Oh, do you think so?
Oh, definitely. I think you're adorable. And I want to speak to you again. So do call again.
I will call again, yeah.
Good, excellent. I'm so pleased. Isn't she lovely? Oh, I liked her. I know I'm not supposed to have favourites, am I? It's like chill with children. Not allowed. I've got to take a break. Back in a sec.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, good morning. This is Talk, and it's Petrie here with you till the top of the hour. And we are asking, I'm asking the question this morning: is 16 too young to vote? Because new rules set out in the Representation of the People Bill, introduced today, February the 12th, will extend voting rights in the UK, all UK elections, to 16 and 17-year-olds. Leah sent a brilliant message here. It says, personally, I think 16 is too young to vote. At that age, you can't legally smoke, drink or drive. All things society restricts because we accept that judgment and risk assessments are still developing. Good point. Voting is arguably an even bigger responsibility because you're helping decide national direction. And this isn't an attack on young people, it's about consistency. If we say somebody isn't ready for certain adult decisions at 16, it's reasonable to question whether they're ready for civic decisions. From my own experience, I didn't start voting until my mid-20s, not because I was lazy, but because I simply didn't understand the system or feel connected to it. As As you said at the start, political engagement often comes with life experience, work, bills, mortgages, families, things that make policy feel real rather than abstract. I'm also sceptical that many would vote at all, but I'm an old, out-of-touch, grumpy bloke now at nearly 50, so may be wrong. Nearly 50? You say you're 49? That's not old. Stop it. If you knew how old I was, you can sign me to the bin. Anyway, that's not old, but that is a brilliant, a really good, well thought out and put together text. I like that a lot. So Lee in Birmingham, thank you very much indeed. Chris says, I suspect that the left's urge to give 16-year-olds the vote is exactly as Petrie said. It's easier to sell them idealism. I was just 18 for the 2014 Scottish independence vote, and the 2 years running up was a slew of school teachers preaching the SNP gospel to us, embedding it as a core belief for some. Labour are hapless, but not totally stupid. They can see the extra support for the left from this. Good point, Chris. I absolutely agree with that. And Catherine, thank you for the compliment. So to answer your question about the voting age, 16 is quite absurd. Many lawyers suggest the beneficiary age for an inheritance is 21 to 25 years of age, as the brain has reached full adult maturity by then. It is not advisable under that age. We all know the reason why they've done this. It's self-serving and wrong. And that's from Catherine in Melbourne, Australia. I lived in Melbourne for a while, in Toorak. Lovely. I loved it there. Right, Terry is in Dover. Good morning, Terry.
Good morning, Petrie.
What do we think? Is 16 too young?
It was a good point just now made by the person you read out the thing about 17, 18, smoking.
Yeah,
drinking,
yeah. The things
driving.
they're not allowed to do because we don't trust them. Getting a tattoo, things like that, life
Very good
decisions.
point. Yeah, I mean, can I start off by making a weak joke? It's sort of gerrymandering, isn't it? If it was for pensioners, would it be called geriatric mandering? Sorry about that.
I think that's very good. I'm going to use that. Geriatric mandering. I love that.
All I would say on, well, not all I would say on this, Petrie, but yes, 16 is probably a bit young. You should standardise it with the drinking and the smoking and the driving, possibly 17, 18. But I think many young people now, are much more intelligent. If you get these vox pops in the high street, and I don't mean to be mean here, but when they talk to many people and so-called mature people, their comments are rather simplistic, and I would say that young people who are doing O-level economics, A-level economics, are much more.
Well, you've just shown your age
people.
now.
Sorry?
O-level.
Well, yeah, I'm showing my age a bit. GCSE, of course,
That's
now,
my language. You're fine. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
But yeah, it's a difficult one. It's sort of subjective, really. It depends what your views are. But that, as I say, that last person who mentioned the smoking, drinking, etc.
Lee, yeah, it was a really well put together message actually, and just saying, and the courts differentiate between 16 and 18-year-olds, right?
Yeah,
the barristers use youth as a defence. All of these things, because we accept that a 16-year-old. Their frontal cortex hasn't fully developed, right? And that's where empathy lies. That's where, thought for sympathy and thoughts for other people lie. That's why 16-year-olds have got no empathy, right? It's not because they're nasty. It's because they have brains haven't developed. Yeah. So how are they going to be voting? They're not.
Yeah, just remind me, Petrie, that the voting thing is probably key here. Well, when I first voted, years and years ago in the 70s, it was 21. Is it 18 now?
It's 18, yeah.
Well, at least make it 18.
Yeah.
If you can vote at 18, don't bring it down to 16. Just leave it at 18.
But there's so much that they could vote for that they don't have any skin in the game. Right? They don't pay tax. They're not involved in all of those adulting things. They can't fight in a war that they might inadvertently push a political party towards. There's a lot. I think you have to have skin in the game.
Yeah. Can I just make a key point that I'd almost forgotten about here? actually, I came to your programme about 12:30, so I'm not sure whether this point has been mentioned. Obviously, Labour want to do this because most young people are socialists these days, aren't they? They vote Labour.
Yeah, well, I mean, the last poll that was done on young people suggested that they wanted a dictatorship rather than a democracy, which is horrifying.
Well, that's incredible. I can't believe that.
Yeah.
Why? What was the reason for that?
Oh, I don't know, because they thought it would be easier. That's what I'm saying. Is young people just don't. They're so far away from what has happened in Europe in the war and everything. They've got no clue.
But if you pin them down, I bet they, if it was a choice between right wing and left wing, they would say we want a left wing dictatorship. We don't want a right wing dictatorship.
No, I don't want any. I want government small and keeping out of our way. That's rather idealistic of me, isn't it?
Well, you're conservative then, aren't you, basically?
No, I'm not actually. Yeah, I just think that I just don't like government overreach, and there's too much of that going on at the moment. And something like this should perhaps be put to a referendum as to whether 16 and 17-year-olds should vote. But we're stuck with it now. That's what's happening. Yeah. And maybe they just won't bother to vote. Yeah,
just your other point on proportional representation that somebody brought up. Mm-hmm. That's a difficult one, isn't it? Because was it was excuse me, my voice is a bit croaky. Was it was Nick Clegg a few years ago?
Yeah, it was the Lib Dems and they sold that down the river.
Wasn't it? Yeah. But the thing is with that, it's a good idea in many respects, but I think you lose the link between the constituency and the MP. I mean, what MP do you put in there then?
Well, I suppose the one with the most votes. I mean, I don't know, but something's got to change, Terry, but PR does leave you open to a lot of coalitions, but I think we're going to be stuck with that anyway. Terry, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. That's pretty much it from me, but I just want to end by telling you something about Pokemon Go. You know Pokemon Go, where they track down Pokemon creatures. Well, apparently the game has had to remove the Epstein Island from the game. Yeah, children were going onto the Epstein Island to play Pokemon.